Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC with Andrew Pearce. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC.
Good evening to you, I'm Andrew Pearce, with you right up until 10 o'clock, and what a day of political drama. We leave the European Union. David Cameron then stuns the political world, or did he? Was it expected? Resigning as Prime Minister, indicating he'll hand the reins over to a successor at the October Tory conference. Has he stood down too soon? Who should replace him? And what of that man, Jeremy Corbyn? He faces a challenge too. Is it time for him to leave the field? Is he up to it? Because the Labour vote really disappointed if you wanted to remain in last night's referendum. Do call, we'll be taking your views. I'm Andrew Pearce and I'm with you here on LBC until 10 o'clock. But first, LBC's most talked about, just to introduce my guests in the studio tonight. 4 guests tonight, as it's such a special occasion. 2 Leavers, 2 Remainers. Baroness Sal Brinton, Liberal Democrat Party President. Peter Lilly, Conservative MP for Hitchin and Harpenden, and a former Cabinet Minister under Mrs Thatcher and John Major. Lady Victoria Borwick, the Conservative MP for Kensington. And Tulip Siddiq, have I pronounced that right? Siddiq, the Labour MP for Hampstead and Kilburn, who happens to be my local MP. But first, let's hear how it all went down.
The total number of votes cast in favour of Remain was 16,141,241. The total number of votes cast in favour of Leave was 17,410,742.
The United Kingdom has voted to leave the European Union. The pound has fallen to a 31-year low.
June the 23rd needs to become a national bank holiday, and we will call it Independence Day.
So, a day of drama. Of course, I was up late and I heard Nigel Farage actually at one point concede defeat. In fact, I think he conceded defeat twice. So, Peter Lilly, did you ever think this day would come? A veteran campaigner to leave the European Union?
Actually, I'm not a veteran campaigner to leave. I wanted to sort of ease our way gradually from inside out, but I've always been a critic of it, and I'm realised eventually that we got to leave. But no, I didn't expect it to happen this time, and I didn't expect it to happen when I went to bed. I woke up a happy man.
What time did you wake up?
4 o'clock.
Did you put the radio on?
I did, and I couldn't get back to sleep.
Of course you couldn't.
So that was the end of it, my attempts at some rest.
Now, Baroness Sal Brinton, you campaigned fiercely throughout the referendum campaign to Remain. Mm-hmm. How bad is this for you?
Obviously, very disappointed as a party, because I think we're the one unified party wanting to Remain. I think my personal disappointment is that I actually worked on the European referendum bill back in 2011, and I still don't understand quite why we had the need for the referendum, given that we'd actually got everything in legislation if there was a change to the treaty. And so, as a result, I mean, I do feel that certainly David Cameron has done a bit of an own goal, self-inflicted wound, because it's got increasingly close as time went on. And very, very sadly, a lot of the debate was not about core European issues. It was about other things that people felt very, very worried about, immigration being one of them. And it's already clear from some of the things that have been said today that some on the Leave side recognise immigration probably won't change that much as a result of
It was a problem for you, though, of course. The Lib Dems just didn't get into the national debate. You were drowned out by the row in the Tory party.
And it was absolutely frustrating that. So what we did instead was to focus on getting our vote out. And I have to say we were very positive about that. And it's been really helpful to us as a party. So much so that today we're having a surge, rather as we did the day after the general election last year.
What, more members?
More members.
Every cloud has a silver lining.
Well, we had 25 new members by lunchtime in my local association.
Did you
people
really?
Phoning in, yeah.
I saw a letter in the Daily Telegraph today, Peter, saying I'm rejoining the Conservative Party because of... Victoria Borwick, why did David Cameron call this referendum? It was to shoot the UKIP fox, wasn't it? And in the end, he shot himself.
No, I think it was a really exciting thing, and I think it's a very exciting day. It really shows how important democracy is. I mean, isn't it fantastic? Was it 33 million people voted? I mean, isn't that the fantastic day for democracy? No other party promised a referendum. David Cameron said that he would, Labour Party wouldn't, and he went on through with it, and he campaigned for what he believed with. So I think it's a very sad day for the Conservatives, because David Cameron, won the general election last year, which was absolutely amazing. So I think we all, are really thrilled that in that sense he showed us what democracy is all about, and how exciting for everybody to suddenly engage in politics. I think many more people now know so much more about what the EU does, who their EU representative is, what actually happens. I mean, at last we've got people talking about it.
Chipsdick, you're shaking your head. You're a London MP. At least in London, Remain was strong. The vote was strong.
Yes, that's true. And in Camden and Brent, and I know you live in the constituency, Andrew, people worked tirelessly to get the vote out for Remain. What I would say is that's not reflective of the whole country, obviously. And for someone like me, today has been the biggest political earthquake of my lifetime. And I have felt very depressed about it. But at the end of the day, I'm an elected politician. I believe in democracy. If people voted because they wanted to leave, then we have to respect that mandate, and we have to respect their decision. My job as an elected politician, and I think all politicians, is to be responsible and to make sure that vulnerable people are protected as we exit the EU. And I'd like to ask the Leavers, what is your exit plan? What do you plan to do? Because I don't think the campaign ever made it clear. There are many ways to exit. It's not going to be an easy decision. There are treaties to redraw, documents to look at. But what is their plan? Because I'd like to hear more.
Well, let's ask Peter Lilly. What's the plan? Are you going to invoke this Article 50? And if you are, will you explain to listeners what it is?
Well, Article 50 is the article in the treaty which lays down a process by which a member state can leave. Member state has to notify the Commission that it wishes to leave. From that moment onwards, there's up to 2 years, unless by mutual consent that's extended, to negotiate the details of leaving. There are alternatives. One can simply leave. Greenland, actually, is the only predecessor who left the European Union before this clause even existed, and they simply announced their decision to leave and then negotiated new terms with the rest of the EU. Obviously, we're a rather bigger kettle of fish than the Greenlanders are. I personally am not sure that it is right to invoke Article 50, because the British people have just renounced the treaties. It's rather then odd to do something using the treaty which we've just renounced. But this is for discussion.
So what would be the alternative then?
The alternative is that we simply announce that we've left. We then repeal the European Communities Act, which makes us subservient to European law. Then we do something which might seem paradoxical. We incorporate all existing laws and regulations from the EU into our own domestic law. You might think that's odd if we're just leaving the place, but then you're entitled to amend, repeal, alter, improve those laws at your leisure. And this is effectively when India became independent. What they did was incorporate all imperial law into Indian law. When Canada became independent, that's what they did. So it means that you have a smooth transition, all existing laws there, but Parliament can, when it wants,
check out the ones it doesn't like or amend them.
Yeah. So we don't have to go through and say, do we want this one now? Do we want to keep that one? You keep them all initially and then change them at your leisure.
That sounds quite sensible, Baroness Brinton.
It would if Article 50 has to be invoked. I mean, that's the problem. It is quite clear in the yes, it is quite clear in the treaty that for a member state to leave the Union, it has to invoke Article 50, and it has to do so within 2 years, which is why all the debate is about do we declare now or do we wait a bit? And what's very interesting today is that Jean-Claude Juncker and various other people in Europe have said, actually, we want it invoked quickly. The whole point of having a 2-year limit on it was that things didn't dawdle, and you've got to start negotiating and work very quickly. There's also 2 major European elections coming up, and I think both France and Germany are quite keen for the details to be well underway and sorted out before they get into national elections.
Because they're worried that
you may well be right.
They're worried it's going to contaminate their own election, of course. Victoria Borwick.
I mean, this is nuts. We've just had this great day of freedom, of independence, and then you're saying we've got to wait and be dictated to again as to when we invoke this article. I mean, the wonderful thing is that we can take time, as made quite clear this morning. Yes, of course, other people are pressuring us because it's suits them. But we're no longer going to be dictated to by Europe, and that's the really important thing about today. And that's why we should take our time. As you say, there are other elections that are coming on stream, and I think that gives every country the opportunity of saying, would we like a looser agreement? I mean, when David Cameron went in to negotiate what it was the end of last year, I think all those countries should have taken that opportunity to say yes, because there's so much ill feeling about some of the restrictions that Europe puts on and some of the costs. So this is a fantastic opportunity for everyone just to sit back and relax and then decide what they are going to do, and if there's a way forward that means that people can trade together without all falling out.
Quickly,
very quickly. I mean, David Cameron has been very clear that Article 50 is the way to make things change. The debate is about whether it's invoked quickly or not. If the European Union says actually the intention in the bill, in the Act, is that it is invoked quickly, then we have to start negotiating with them, even if it's about when it starts. And that's the problem, because it's lovely to say, well, we'll do it at our leisure, we'll do it in exactly the way we want. But actually, we are not the only party here. There's 27 other member states who we have to start negotiating with, who have other priorities.
In terms of whether we rush out or we stay in, just to look at the facts, the stock markets are down, the pound is weaker than it's been in decades against the dollar. People are moving money out of the UK. A constituent emailed me today telling me he lost his job with the manufacturing firm that sells mostly to the EU. Let's think carefully about how this decision will impact vulnerable people and how we protect them in terms of disability rights, in terms of maternity rights. We've made the decisions. The politicians now need to get on and exit quickly and not let the country suffer.
OK, the time is now coming up to 7:15. I'm Andrew Pearce. It's Friday evening. You're listening to LBC's Most Talked About. Time is 7:15.
Pearce.
With you until 10. With me now, LBC's Most Talked About. Just to remind you, in the studio with me is Baroness Brinton, the Liberal Democrat Party President, Peter Lilly, the Tory MP for Hitchin and Harpenden, and a former Cabinet Minister, Victoria Borwick, who's the Conservative MP for Kensington, Tulip Sadiq, who is the Labour MP for Hampstead and Kilburn. The Tulip and Baroness Brinton were both for Remain, so they're a little disappointed. Peter Lilly and Victoria Borwick have rather large smiles on their faces because they were for out. Now, David Cameron says we should have a new Prime Minister by October after resigning over Britain's vote to leave the EU.
I was absolutely clear about my belief that Britain is stronger, safer and better off inside the European Union. And I made clear the referendum was about this and this alone, not the future of any single politician, including myself. But the British people have made a very clear decision to take a different path. And as such, I think the country requires fresh leadership to take it in this direction. I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination.
So, Victoria Borwick, what happened to that Save Dave campaign that I read about in all the newspapers? People were signing, Tory MPs were signing letters. I think Peter Lilly might have signed the letter. Did you sign the letter?
No, but I would have done if
you'd been asked. Yeah.
Had it in front.
Did you sign the letter?
If I'd been asked.
Oh, right. Do you think he's done the right thing?
Well, he obviously felt very passionately about it. I mean, he has campaigned in every part of the country. You know, he led the negotiations and he has campaigned. And then this morning he obviously decided, I think I should half exhausted, I should think, after working so hard. But he's been a fantastic Prime Minister. He has tremendous loyalty from the party, certainly. And I think, obviously, he's the one who led us to a general election victory last year. So I think it's with great sadness, and we all pay great tribute to him. But I presume he feels that it's right for the next person to take on the next part of the role.
Have you made your mind up who you will vote to replace him?
No, I'm waiting to hear who's going to stand.
I think we can assume Boris will stand. And Theresa May, the Home Secretary.
Amongst many others, I think.
Right, so you're not telling me yet. You haven't made your mind up yet.
I'm waiting to hear.
Do you think the Prime Minister did the right thing?
I think the Prime Minister was forced into a corner where he had to. I think David Cameron will be remembered as the man who forced us, really, to leave the EU. And I fear for the future of my newborn daughter, and I fear for the future of the 16 and 17-year-olds I spoke to at a debate in Parliament yesterday, organised by iDebate, who talked about what they wanted to achieve in the future, because I really do think we are in a situation where we've never been before, but we also don't know what the future holds. So I am worried about it.
But what are you frightened of?
I'm frightened of the fact that we need more cooperation on tackling global issues like climate change, I don't think we need less cooperation between countries. We need more cooperations. I'm worried about things like maternity rights, disabled rights, the fact that after the 7/7 attacks, we used the EU search warrant to catch some of the people who did the crime. Those are the things I'm worried about. I'm also worried about a future when we're not in the EU, because in my lifetime we always have been.
Peter Lilly, is your parliamentary colleague, albeit on the other side of the argument, is she right to be worried about these things?
She's right to want cooperation, and so do I. But we can have cooperation without subordination. And that's what we voted for. We haven't voted to cut ourselves off with the continent. Andrew, I spent quite a lot of time on the continent. I have all sorts of friends there. I've been chairman of a German company, worked on the continent, got a house in France, and so on. I want to cooperate, but it should be cooperating as an independent country. And we'll do that on all the issues we do already. And I just can't imagine that we're going to cease to cooperate, particularly on security, when it's obviously in our interests, in our partners' interests on the continent, that we cooperate, just as we cooperate with Australia, Canada, New Zealand and USA without any subordination.
That's right, is it? I mean, it's not as if Germany and France are suddenly going to say Tulip City, well, we're not cooperating with you now, you've left the EU, because it's in their interest too, isn't it? They want access to the great GCHQ listening centre, which is one of the great bulwarks against terrorism.
Well, they're already telling us to make the decision quickly. A lot of the leaders are. I think my worry is, and I'll say this plainly, I think in the EU, working together with other countries, we're a stronger force than we are by ourselves.
Baroness Brinton.
I think one of my great concerns, and David Cameron articulated this very well during the campaign, is the problems we will face with the single market. I mean, I think everyone accepts there will still be the access to the single market, but it's what it is going to cost us. The single market with tariffs, which is what Norway has to pay, Switzerland has hit problems in having to pay higher tariffs as well, means profitability of our companies. Tariffs, actually. Well, let me just tell you that the Horizon 2020 fund, Switzerland has had its status changed and it's having to contribute more, a higher tariff to get into that particular fund.
The head of the German CBI, the night before the referendum, said it's ridiculous to suggest that a whole new wave of tariffs will spring up between Britain and Germany if we leave the EU, because it wouldn't benefit Germany.
That may be the equivalent of the CBI, but that is not what the politicians in Germany and particularly
But don't they listen to people in the CBI industry? Of course they do.
As indeed do we. And what is interesting is that our CBI said that they wanted us to remain because access to the single market was so important. My husband is an engineer and businessman, and his firm will find it very, very difficult trading in Europe if they've got to do bills of lading and
we import more from Europe.
We may do, but it's not. That's not.
Why
my
should
point,
they give
Victoria.
that up?
That is not. I'm not suggesting they give it up. What I'm suggesting is that the arrangements to trade become more complex. That means more cost for businesses, which reduces profitability. Profitability then reduces tax take, and who loses out? The government.
But as Andrew says, why should they make it more difficult? I mean, all those arrangements that Tulip's identified were in place before and will be in place again. But this is our opportunity to decide how our money is spent and to make our own laws and our decisions about our own future. This has given the British people their voice back. And that's what it showed by the turnout yesterday. It showed that British people were fed up by being told what to do by a country and by people they were not electing themselves.
And that is fine, and I absolutely agree that the people have spoken. The problem is the cost of coming out, because you can't leave the club and then expect the same arrangements with the club without any changes. And it is those changes that I am concerned about.
But why are we only trading there?
Peter Lilly.
We are trading elsewhere, Victoria.
Peter Lillian.
I was actually the Secretary of State who introduced the single market programme in this country. And throughout this referendum campaign, I've heard more nonsense talked about the single market than about anything else. It's talked about as if it's some kind of inner sanctum. It was actually an agreement that we standardise product and other specifications so that manufacturers, instead of having to produce 28 different models of refrigerator, one for each country, could produce one for the whole of the European market. And that was as much of an advantage to an American manufacturer exporting to Europe as it was to a German manufacturer exporting within. It will make no difference to us whether we're in or out. And now people say, oh, but we'll lose influence if and when there are any new standards on which agreement has to be reached. I have to say the value of that is hugely overblown. We, as a nation, set the rules for tennis and for football, but it doesn't mean we win Wimbledon, and we almost never win the World Cup. Those rules have to be agreed, and it doesn't make too much difference whether they're there or not.
Technology specifications, which is the area that my husband works in, is very different to the rules of football and tennis. And I absolutely remember when you were minister and brought those in, because I was a new mum, just as Tulip is now, and my husband disappeared off to Europe and had to get the product for part of Big Bang, the new first touchscreen dealing desks for stockbrokers, through every single different set of specification. There was no standardisation. Now there is one, and we have been absolutely leading the way. The problem is when we are not absolutely core part of what the EU decides is the standard, our influence will lessen. It won't go, but it will lessen. And that is one of the concerns that I think a lot of people, particularly in industry, have.
Let me go back to Cameron, because I was asking about David Cameron. Peter Lilly, you've been around the political scene a long time. Did you expect him to go as quickly as that?
I very much wanted him to stay. I hoped he might stay. I could appreciate that normally when a Prime Minister has lost a referendum of that importance and campaigned on one side, resignation might be called for, but I thought he was in a unique position because he'd already announced that he was going to go before the end of the Parliament. He'd also been the person who'd given us this choice. He could have legitimately said, I've given you a choice, I hear your voice, I take it as an instruction, I'm going to put competent and committed people in the Treasury and in the Foreign Office to carry it through, and I will remain overseeing the process until I was going to go anyway. But he's chosen otherwise, and he's done so because he's an extremely honourable man, and we should respect that.
Tulip Siddiq, as a Labour MP, tell me honestly, who is the Tory politician you would fear the most as Prime Minister, the next Tory leader?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I have to say I haven't really thought about that so far. What I have thought about is that I fear for the country if Nigel Farage becomes more and more important in the political spectrum, and that's what I don't want. I do hope Nigel Farage doesn't see this as a vote of confidence in him. The people who told me that they were voting Leave were voting in spite of Nigel Farage, not because of him. And I worry, and this would be my worry, that the next leader of the Tories decides to make some kind of pact with Nigel Farage because he is poisonous and we don't want him around.
We're going to talk, if you don't mind, we're going to talk about Nigel Farage in the next section so we can move on. I wanted to ask Baroness Brinton, do you think Cameron did the right thing?
I think he was left with no option for exactly the reasons that Peter has set out. He is an honourable man. I may disagree with him politically on some things, but he's very clear. He called the referendum and he lost, and he clearly felt that his position was undermined. And I regret that, but I think he's absolutely right to have done that.
We'll talk about the Liberals in a bit, but again, it just squeezes you people out of the story completely, doesn't it?
Well, actually, that's interesting because I'm not sure it does, particularly if a more right-wing Conservative takes over the reins as Prime Minister, because actually what we've seen with Corbyn on the left is there's a big gap in the middle, and certainly in terms of the vote that we're getting, we've found certainly over the last year, we are certainly beginning to get our voice heard at a local level. But you are right, the media at the moment are certainly ignoring us.
Is it the media?
Corbyn's going to be there, is he?
That would be very interesting.
There's a motion. We're going to talk about that later too, so we will get on to that. Do you blame the media for the fact that Liberal Democrats are not getting their voice across? It's because you're only 8 MPs now. You were 57
But it's the media's
before.
attitude about having only 8 MPs that has been certainly part of the problem.
But we should give the Ulster Unionists more coverage because there's more of them than you.
There is another factor that a lot of media use, which they've conveniently forgotten with us, which is the number of votes cast in the 2015 election, and we got more than the Ulster Unionists, and we certainly got more than the SNP.
All right, that told me. Just time check. You're listening to LBC's Most Talked About. I'm Andrew Pearce. The time is 7:30 here with your latest headlines. Ros Unwin. With me for LBC's Most Talked About. Just to remind you of the guests, Tulip Siddiq, who is Labour MP for Hampstead and Kilburn. Victoria Borwick, she was for Remain, of course. Victoria Borwick is the Tory MP for Kensington. She was for Leave. Peter Lilly, Tory MP for Hitchin and Harpenden, Leave too. And of course, Baroness Brinton, Liberal Democrat Party President, she was for Remain. Now, Jeremy Corbyn's leadership of the Labour Party is also now moving to the centre of the political debate. It's being challenged after he is accused of giving only lukewarm support to remaining in the EU. Sky's Dermot Murnaghan asked him if he'd be stepping down.
No. We are accepting the result, obviously. The country has been divided, but has made a decision. We now have to organise how we leave the European Union, but crucially, how we develop a strong economic relationship with Europe and indeed other parts of the world. A very large number of jobs rely on that.
Well, Tulip Sadiq, I was at a Sky debate with Corbyn. The only one he did, it was with young people this week, when he was asked would he accept responsibility if it was a Leave vote, and he was quite tetchy and said, no, why should I? Well, when you look at the results, Sunderland, Labour stronghold, 61% in favour of Leave. In a number of traditional Labour heartlands, there was a huge vote for Leave. The Labour vote didn't do what it was supposed to do. That surely can only be put at the door of the leader, Jeremy Corbyn.
You cannot blame a result like today, as I've said, the biggest political earthquake of my lifetime, on the door of one person, and certainly not just of Jeremy Corbyn. The fact is, both of the campaigns were quite negative and divisive, and both campaigns had their faults, I thought. I think we've had lots of knee-jerk reactions, lots of generalisation. I think at the moment we have to ponder carefully and reflect on what the country needs at the moment. But I, for one, do not blame one single person, whoever it is, on either side. I've already told you, I do blame Nigel Farage for the hatred that seeped into this campaign, and a lot of the, frankly speaking, racist posters that they put out, in particular. Okay. You know which one I'm thinking about.
I do, but let's keep it to Labour, because on Monday, talk us through this, Tulip. Margaret Hodge, a very senior Labour MP, Dame Margaret Hodge, and Anne Coffey have tabled a motion of no confidence which will go before the Parliamentary Labour Party. What does that mean, and what will happen?
Okay, I know as much as you do, Andrew, in terms of I've just heard as well from the news, no one has contacted me, if you like, officially from the PLP or from the MPs, that there is a vote of no confidence which is being tabled. It will be discussed at the PLP. At the PLP we have every Monday at 6 o'clock. It will be discussed there. The chairman will decide, and then if it goes through, there will be a secret ballot and there'll be a vote on Tuesday. That's as far as I know. I haven't seen the wording of the motion, and I'm not sure what it calls for.
And if he loses the confidence, the secret ballots, then there's a leadership contest, presumably. Does his name automatically go on the ballot paper as the leader?
This is the million-dollar question. I have heard that it does go. On the other hand, I've only been part of one leadership election, and he had to have a certain number of MPs to get him on the ballot. So from what I can gather, his name is on the ballot paper, but I haven't had that confirmed either way. And as I say, no official reaching out from the party yet.
It's all your fault, because you were one of those MPs, Tulip Sadiq, who put his name on the ballot paper, and then you didn't vote for him.
For a second, Andrew, I thought you were going to say it's all my fault that we voted to leave the EU, and I wasn't going to take responsibility for that. I did nominate Jeremy, and I did it to broaden the debate. I also did it because a lot of my local party members in Hampstead and Kilburn asked me to broaden the debate. Yes, I voted for Andy Burnham. Do I think Andy would have been different? Probably would have been different, but let's get back to the reason...
But do you regret voting for putting his name on the ballot paper?
Do you know what? Actually, no, I don't regret putting Jeremy Corbyn's name on the ballot paper, because who am I to say anything if 250,000 people voted for Jeremy to be leader? It's the same way people voted to leave the EU. That's the democratic mandate of people, and I respect that. I'm not a hypocrite. I stand for election. I let people vote for me. I don't know if you voted for me, Andrew, by the way, but, you know, people in Hampstead and Kilburn did vote for me. That smile tells me he didn't. But I, at the end of the day, it's democracy at work, and people voted for Jeremy Corbyn to be leader.
You were grimacing, Victoria Borwick, when Tulip was saying that it wasn't his fault.
Well, Labour heartlands voted out. I mean, David Cameron campaigned with passion. Whether or not I agreed with him or not, he did campaign with conviction and passion. You cannot say that anything other than Jeremy Corbyn was a reluctant campaigner. He didn't seem very keen on Remain either.
See, I think these are the arguments that we need to get rid of. I don't think either campaign engaged with each other's concern. It just wasn't a grown-up conversation. That was the problem.
Yeah, but I read somewhere that about 10 days ago, half of Labour voters didn't know what the party's policy was.
Well, I don't think that's true. I mean, we were very clear on the fact that we wanted to stay in. You can't have the same kind of rhetoric from all leaders. That's Jeremy Corbyn's style of speaking. I don't think it should be seen as reluctance. That's how he is.
Baroness Brinton, you're very disappointed today. We voted to leave. Do you hold in some way culpable and responsible the Labour leadership for their role in the campaign?
I think very baffled by Jeremy Corbyn's role. There are other people in the Labour leadership who I think did extremely well. Chuka Umunna and Harriet Harman. One of the real pleasures of this last week was watching the cross-party team at the Wembley debate, particularly that panel at the other end, not the main debaters standing up. And I think that really showed that there were times when the Remain campaign worked together. The problem was that Jeremy Corbyn never seemed to be part of it. And I think Victoria is right. The real sadness for us is that the Labour heartlands just didn't come out in the north of England. I know they did down in London, which was great for London, but we really needed more.
But you've seen some light, cloud in, what am I saying, silver lining in the clouds, because for the Liberal Democrats you did get your vote out, and you've now already seen a pick-up in membership.
Indeed, it's a bit like the surge we had immediately after the general election last year. I was in the office earlier, and in 2-3 hours we'd had well over 1,000 members joining. I don't know what's happened since, because I've been outside at other meetings, but it has that sort of feel of people saying, I'm a proud European, and actually I want a strong party that represents those interests. Doesn't mean we want to rerun the referendum, that's not the issue at all, but it's making sure that in whatever we negotiate, we recognise that this country needs to have influence in Europe, but it also needs to be part of what is going on in Europe, and the Liberal Democrats have long espoused that.
Peter Lilly, I mean, you've seen a lot of Labour leaders. Is he the least effective you've been up against in the Commons? I mean, I think you were there when Michael Foot was leader too, weren't you? Or 1983 election he fought.
I came in 1983 and Michael Foot went out.
Yeah.
He probably is the least effective, but I don't think that's got anything to do with the result. The result, I fear, is because the link between the traditional Labour working class vote and the metropolitan Labour leadership is almost as great as the difference, detachment between the Scottish Labour voter and the Scottish Labour, but for different reasons. And the more the Labour Party, the London-led Labour Party, which worked in London, but the London-led Labour Party campaigned in the provinces, the more they revealed to Labour voters that they weren't speaking the same language. As long as Labour in London is about sort of virtue signalling on immigration, on the EU, on issues like that, the ordinary Labour voter in the country who's worried about council housing and jobs and things like that, which he relates in part to, or he or she relate in part to the scale of immigration. And as long as they're being told that they're racist for having those perfectly legitimate concerns, I think the danger is that the Labour Party could lose that vote to UKIP. I don't want it to lose that vote to UKIP. I'd like it to lose some of it to us.
That the EU has artificially held down people's wage rises. Yeah. We've seen that because of the EU regulations, we weren't able to bail out Tata or any of those other companies. We have seen in the heartlands, in the Labour heartlands, how the EU has artificially and restricted people's freedom. This is the great opportunity for the people to fight back and say, listen to us, we've suffered long enough, we want our freedom, and I think that's the great opportunity. We're going to maintain the best of the EU and make sure we throw out the worst and get our sovereignty back. What flag do you want to wave tomorrow? Well, I'm very pleased to be waving the Union Jack.
Can I ask you, Julie, do you think that Jeremy Corbyn was right to have vetoed, this wasn't just press hyperbole, it was true, he vetoed any mention of immigration in the Labour leaflets, and yet clearly it was a huge concern, as Peter Lilly said, in quite a lot of parts of Britain, because people are worried about school places in the NHS. Do you think he was right to have done that?
No, I don't think he was right.
So you think Labour should be engaging on this?
Absolutely, without a shadow of doubt. I mean, I've been saying this for a long time. There was no one drinking from the mug that said controls on immigration in my office, I can tell you, at the last election. And I do think we should be engaging, and I think one of the biggest mistakes we made was we let Nigel Farage hijack this argument. And I said in my maiden speech over a year ago that this referendum can't become a proxy vote on immigration, and in some ways it felt like it did to an extent. But do I think we should ignore immigration and the concerns people have? Of course not. We should have engaged, and on both sides, I said we should have engaged with each other's concerns. What we shouldn't do when we talk about immigration is make very large, general, dramatic, sweeping statements about the country being taken over, the resources being stretched. That's not what we want to do. But genuine concerns, absolutely. I think Jeremy Corbyn was wrong, and I, for one, did discuss immigration on the doorstep in my constituency, and I hope others did as well.
I must ask you this, because if there is a motion, I know it's a secret ballot, but your constituents will want to know, would you vote to get rid of him?
Look, as I said, we've
I think
just
you're about
voted,
to sit on the fence here.
No, well, it's more than sitting on the fence, Andrew. It's about we've just voted to leave the EU. Scotland wants to have a second independence referendum. David Cameron has just resigned.
So you're not going to tell me?
I've just got too much in my head.
You're not going to tell me?
Haven't slept much with an 11-week-old, so yeah, no, I don't know yet. I don't know yet. When I do know you're a constituent, you have a right to know. I will tell you.
Very good. Just going to go around the table very quickly. If you were a Labour MP, Victoria Boyd, would you vote to get rid of Corbyn?
I fear so.
Sal Brinton?
I would as well.
Peter Lilly?
Well, as long as there's someone better to put in his place.
Don't think it'd be any worse, could there?
As a performer, you couldn't get anywhere much worse. But actually, I can remember in Camden, I did a debate in Camden, and I was surprised by the number of people who came up to me and said, I work in the NHS, so I'm a supporter of Corbyn, but I'm also a supporter of getting out. And those, unless you've got people in the Labour Party who are prepared to represent that, you say you engage with people about immigration. I did 1, 2 or 3 debates every day for the last 6 weeks. And every time the Labour spokesman said, of course we must take seriously people's concerns about immigration. And then they told them that they were racist for having these concerns. And that's what it always amounted to.
Sorry, I'm not sure why this is all being blamed at the Labour Party in terms of the result or people's immigration.
Because you cut immigration out of your election leaflets.
No, I mean, of course, I've already said we should definitely be talking about immigration. But I also think there was a very divisive campaign fought, and no one can deny that. And the Tories played a big part in it.
All right.
Labour heartlands voted out.
Yeah, OK. This is LBC's Most Talked About, and they're talking a lot, which is what we like. I'm Andrew Pearce. The time is now 7:46.
This is LBC with Andrew Pearce.
And with me still for the last part of LBC's Most Talked About, Baroness Brinton, the Lib Dem President, Peter Lilly, the Conservative MP for Hitchin and Harpington, Victoria Borwick, the Tory MP for Kensington, who was also for Leave, and Tulip Sadiq, the Labour MP for Hampstead and Kilburn, who was for Remain. Now, the majority of people in Scotland and Northern Ireland voted to stay in the EU. Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says a second referendum there is now highly likely.
If Parliament judges that a second referendum is the best or only way to protect our place in Europe, it must have the option to hold one. That means we must act now to protect that position.
Baroness Brinton, we were talking off air. You think they've always been positioning themselves for that anyway?
I think they have, and I think there are 2 warning signs. One has been the drop in oil price, although it is beginning to increase again. But the other is the interesting drop in their vote in the central belt of Scotland yesterday, where Glasgow and across through Stirling was much, much lower. And I think it's the same problem that Labour had in their heartlands. It's the old Labour vote that didn't come out. And I think she thinks that she will get that Labour vote back if she can have another referendum.
Yeah, and Victoria Borwick, that would be a terrible legacy for David Cameron if the union breaks up, particularly if they vote to leave.
Absolutely. I think we all want to keep Great Britain as Great Britain, with all of us united. The United Kingdom should obviously remain, and we should all obviously work together to achieve that. So I hope that's something that we can all work on.
Julep, are you a big supporter of the union?
Well, I think David Cameron will be remembered as the Prime Minister who made us leave the EU and then broke up the union if this does happen. What I would say about the referendum, it's up to the Scottish people to decide. You can't have someone like me, who's a new London MP, been to Scotland about 3 times in my whole life, to dictate the terms. If they feel a referendum is what they want, then I don't think we should stand in their way.
What do you think, Peter Lilly?
Scotland had a referendum and decided to remain part of the union, knowing full well that meant that some issues would be dealt with by devolved Parliament and others will be dealt with at a UK level, including the upcoming referendum on Europe, which they knew was going to happen. It's been taken at a union level, and I understand that most opinion polls show in Scotland that the last thing they want is a second or a third referendum. And if they did have one, I suspect the result would show a higher proportion of votes for the union than last time, not just because the oil price is now only half what it was then, and the illusion that the Scots Nats portrayed that they could be, get all these massive oil revenues, it will not be there. But also the thought of leaving the United Kingdom, having to adopt the euro, as they'd have to if they applied to join the EU, having a Schengen border across, just north of Hadrian's Wall, that is not an enticing prospect for Scotland.
There's another thing too. Who says that the EU would want Scotland? Because wouldn't Spain veto it because of Catalonia, and Germany might veto it because Bavaria? It could unleash all sorts of nationalist tendencies.
Yep, that would mean that they were really going into the double unknown, maybe outside the UK and outside the EU, with no certainty of ever getting into the EU.
And in the Euro, I think. Having to
if they join,
I'm not sure the Scottish people would want to
choose that.
Now, one of the people crowing loudest today, Tulip Sadiq, and I know you're not very happy about that, was Nigel Farage. You've alluded to him once or twice. What's your problem with him?
Look, after a very close vote, which it was for the referendum results, a divisive campaign, which it was, I think it's time the country came together and we healed divisions. What we don't need is someone like Nigel Farage, who's in it for himself and for personal political ambitions, which is what he wants. And for me, I really hope that he hasn't seen this as a vote of confidence, because one person I do not want ruling this country at a time which is a very difficult time for politicians to try and make decisions to protect vulnerable people is Nigel Farage beaming away and trying to shroud himself in glory. And I really hope the Conservatives don't pander to him and give him some kind of advisory role in the next government.
He's devoted 20 years of his life to this campaign. Don't you have even a grudging respect for him?
Not one shred.
Not one shred. Victoria Borwick, what about you?
Nigel Farage brought out the voters in the Labour heartlands. So I think that's the Labour Party that we've got to watch out. They're the ones who aren't going to have to make concessions to him, because he has proved that he has a great following among Labour voters.
Baroness Brinton.
He has a great following, but it's on a false premise, and he made that clear this morning when, having been part of the £350 million a week, most of which can go to the NHS, the first thing he said this morning was, no, it can't go to the NHS. And I think that's been one of the major problems, because he says one thing but actually means another.
I think, to be fair to him, he was one of those who said that Vote Leave shouldn't have used that figure.
He said that this morning, but he was not very loud about it in the run-up to the polling day.
Peter Lee, do you know him very well?
No.
I'm
not sure I've ever met him. I've been in the same room as him once.
Yeah.
But
I think he's going to target the Labour Party.
Oh, he is. I think he's... I'm told they talk in the UKIP circles of the SNP strategy of effectively displacing the Labour Party as their objective. And they were going to do that if they lost this referendum. And they'll try and do it now they've been part of the winning coalition, or on the same side as the winning coalition. But unlike Tudor, I have no idea what his motives are. I don't know why we should assume that he's more venal, more personally motivated than anybody else in politics. And I think it's always a sign of weakness when one starts attacking the motives of one's opponents. Attack their policies, attack their rhetoric if they use objectionable rhetoric, and I think they use an objectionable poster. But to sort of try and say that he's more ambitious personally than anybody else in politics is a bit absurd. We're all personally ambitious.
I would attack his policies if I knew that he had any, to be honest. I don't know what his policies are, except
why are you worried about him
that he's talking about
racism.
I'm worried about him because he injected a lot of hatred into the campaign. This referendum was not a referendum on the Labour Party. This was a referendum on whether we stay or leave the EU. And what Nigel Farage did is he played on people's fears. He used unambiguously racist posters to play on people's fears, and that's what I'm scared about. I don't want someone like that in the political world, and I do fear for that. So I would attack his policies if I knew what they were. All I know is that he doesn't want immigrants. That's all I know about him.
The poster that Peter referred to is the one with the queues of refugees, and the implication of that poster was that they were on our doorstep, which was absolutely not true. They were in Croatia.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the sort of dissembling that makes it very, very difficult for people who don't know the background, and extraordinary, because he is a captivating character. There is no doubt about that at all. He certainly has a way with words. People believed at face value what they saw on the poster and what he was saying, and yet that picture did not tell what was happening on our own doorstep.
Can I just ask a related thing? There's a petition is already going up from Remain supporters to say there's got to be a second referendum because the vote was too close, and they think... Does anyone have any... I could see you all looking horrified at the thought of going through another long, lengthy referendum campaign. But, I mean, presumably it will have to be debated in the Commons because it's already at 160,000. I don't quite know how these things work.
I mean, it'll have to be debated because that's what people want. But if you ask me, I'm sick to my back teeth of elections, I have to be honest.
I think we have rare unanimity in the studio on this.
Well, I've actually enjoyed the last few weeks, but I don't want to go through it again, and I think it would be an insult to the electorate if we did.
Yeah. I think the really good thing is that more people have been energised by politics, and we've got more people on the electoral register. That'll bode well for everybody. We've got more people engaged in politics. People actually understand. They've been phoning yourselves, week after week, day after day. I think the really good thing about this election is suddenly everyone's interested in politics, but heaven's sakes, we don't want to go through this all again.
And I wouldn't disagree with those as a principle. I think the one group of people we've not talked about tonight has been the young people who are extremely upset that essentially they feel a decision has been made by my generation and older, and they are distraught.
But did they vote?
A lot of them did vote. They signed onto the register at the last minute. You remember the government sign crashing and all of that. They are the ones who feel that things have been stolen. And social media today has been absolutely full of a lot of young people.
But we've opened up the world for them. I mean, the really exciting thing...
That is not their view.
It's
not true.
Every time I spoke at a school, or I spoke at the University of Hertfordshire, initially they took a poll before the debate began, 75% in favour of Remain. After hearing the arguments, 55% in favour of leaving. Likewise, a school 2 days ago in Rickmansworth, about a 25% swing to Remain, to leave once they hear the leave case. And they've been sheltered in schools and universities from any criticism at all of the EU. Once they hear the criticism,
it's absolutely not true. Debates that I've taken part in with young people has been
the big thing is, if we've got these amazing young people who are out there doing the most creative things, and now they can trade with the world, they don't have to be restricted by Europe.
Doesn't this one thing mean that we have to work to bring everybody back together?
Right. On that note, LBC's most talked about comes to an end. So if I can thank my guest, Baroness Brinton, the Liberal Democrat Party president, disappointed we came out. Tulip Siddiq, the Labour MP for Hampstead and Kilburn, my MP, we've got to know each other now, who's also disappointed. Victoria Borwick, Tory MP for Kensington, Peter Liddy, Tory MP for Hitchin and Harpenden, who both wanted to leave. So, coming up in a highly powered day of political drama, David Cameron resigns as the Prime Minister. He says he'll hand over his reins to the successor at the Tory party conference in October. Has he stood down too soon? Who should replace him? Boris Gove, Michael Gove, Theresa May, Boris Johnson actually. And what of Jeremy Corbyn? Is he on the way out? Should he be on the way? Your turn to have your say. Do call now. 0345 6060 973. I'm Andrew Pearce. This is LBC, and that's all next.
On FM, online, on your mobile, and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC. Tweet at LBC.
Well, what a day. The Prime Minister has resigned, setting in train a Tory leadership contest. We'll know the name of the new Tory leader by October, the Tory party conference where he or she will be crowned. Who will it be? Boris Johnson is the overwhelming favourite. Theresa May, the Home Secretary. Could it be her? What about Michael Gove? Or is there somebody else you think should succeed? And what of Jeremy Corbyn? He too looks like he could face a potential leadership challenge. But what, more importantly, of the EU? We voted to leave. Have we made the right decision? What should happen next? Are you scared about your future? Have we made the right decision? Is Britain teetering on the edge? Call me now. And you know the number to call. It's 0345 6060 973. We've swept away 50 years of foreign policy. We've turned our back on the EU. It's a day of extraordinary political upheaval. The Prime Minister is on the way out. The currency has been sinking. Stock markets across Europe have been in retreat. And after a lengthy and bad-tempered referendum campaign, we voted by 52% to 48% to end our 43-year membership of the EU. It sent tremors across Europe, and it's triggered financial turmoil across the globe. So are you one of those who voted to leave content you've made the right decision, or did you wake up today and think, oh my God, what have we done? And if you are one of those who wanted to remain, what do you think about the decision today? What is your biggest fear? 0345 6060 973. Well, let's speak to someone who was out campaigning to remain. I saw her campaigning with the Prime Minister. She is the former Labour Cabinet Minister, Tessa Jow, Baroness Tessa Jow. Good evening to you, Tessa.
Good evening, Andrew.
You must be shattered.
Yes, I mean, I think it's devastating, but so too are so many of the young people who've been ringing me today to say, what do we do? What's going to happen? And I think perhaps that's the most important thing, you know, that 75% of young people 18 to 24, according to YouGov, voted to remain, and somehow they feel that their national identity has been taken away from them. That said, the Leave campaign won. The people of this country decided by a majority of more than 1 million votes to leave the European Union. And that now has to be negotiated in our best national interest and to mitigate some of the really terrifying economic predictions that would follow a decision to do what we have done today.
What scares you most?
I think economic uncertainty. There are many things that scare me. Economic uncertainty and the consequences of that for people's family finances, the price of food going up, the price of their weekly bills going up, the cost of their mortgages, where people have mortgages, going up. I think then the other thing that scares me is the businesses that will surely over time be affected by more limited access to migrant labourers. I mean, I think if you go to many farmers and ask them who lifts their crops out of the ground in the middle of winter, they will tell you they rely absolutely on migrant labour. You know, my own city of London, if you go to a coffee shop or most restaurants, the people who serve there are people who've come from other parts of the European Union. So I fear for those businesses. But then I think the third thing that I fear for is the sense, and I think it was a line that David Cameron used during the campaign, that far from this great liberation that the Leavers have talked about, that we become little Britain rather than Great Britain, and are turning our backs on the rest of the world, fearfully turning in on the European Union is something I fear.
What of the Labour Party's role in this, Tessa? You will know that your former parliamentary colleague, Margaret Hodge, has tabled a motion of no confidence which will be debated in Jeremy Corbyn, which will be debated at the Parliamentary Labour Party's routine meeting on Monday. You saw, like everybody else, that in Labour strongholds such as Sunderland, there was a massive vote to leave. 61%, for instance, in Sunderland. Sheffield voted to leave. Large parts of your traditional territory. What went wrong?
Well, I think that despite the very best efforts of Alan Johnson and all the people in the Labour In campaign and the Remain campaign, nothing could quite overcome Jeremy Corbyn's diffidence about the campaign, which he engaged with really very late indeed. And I think it's a failure to understand the nature of leadership. The fact that about 10 days ago, a majority of Labour or willing Labour supporters didn't know what Labour's position was, is a scandal. And, when you are in a campaign like this, for a campaign like this, I'm like any other activist. But there were thousands of our activists out knocking on people's doors, distributing leaflets and all the rest of it. But if you don't have a strong, inspirational voice from the leader of the Labour Party, it's very hard to persuade the people of this country.
Do you? I saw him at the Sky debate. I don't know if you saw that one on television, Tess. It was just before. Didn't. Well, it was he was peculiarly underwhelming, peculiarly unenthusiastic, and he got very little applause. And I know he spent most of his parliamentary career being in the Leave camp. Was he really? Do you think he genuinely wanted to stay in the EU?
No, I don't. I mean, personally, but this is not something I've discussed with him, obviously. No, and the brutal thing about politics at this level is that if you are ambivalent, you're called out. Lack of 100% enthusiasm for the case you're arguing will be spotted by the British people. And I think that was the problem. I think that at some level, Jeremy has a very old-fashioned view of the European Union. He thinks it's a sort of corporate club of fat cats that is propping up failed capitalism, when in fact, talk to most people who, go to work every day. The reason they have statutory holidays is because of the social chapter and the European Union. The reason that young women get maternity leave and maternity pay is because of the European Union. The reason that there is an Equality Act in our country started with Article 13 and the European Union. So much that has shaped our country as a progressive country started in the European Union, and that was the case that was never made. And it's all very well to say, well, there were plenty of other shadow cabinet and other people who could have been making that case. Unless the leader makes it, the case isn't heard.
I don't know if you'll be going to that parliamentary meeting on Monday, will you, Tessa?
Yes, I will.
Do you hope it does go to a vote?
I do.
And would you be voting to get rid of him?
I will listen to the debate, as you will understand, Jeremy, about Jeremy, and I will listen to the debate on Monday, but I have very little confidence in Jeremy's likelihood of ever becoming Prime Minister. And, if you're in a great party like the Labour Party, you have to be able to look at your leader and think of them as one day being Prime Minister, because it's only if the Labour Party governs that we can bring about the change that we all so passionately care about, that we work for, that we campaign for, that we give up all the time when we might be doing other things, because we believe in the power of politics to bring about change. And if you can't see your leader as Prime Minister, then frankly, that time is futile.
Did you ever think in your parliamentary career, Tessa, that we would ever leave the European Union?
No, I didn't. I thought that was one of the settled things about our country. And, I'll tell you something. I was a member of Parliament, and, to a very great extent, I think that these decisions and the future is not for people like me. I have no bitterness. I have no wish to do anything except to see the Labour Party flourish. And so it's got to be the next generation, I think, that takes the initiative on these big decisions, and the new leader has got to be from that next generation of talented young people that we are lucky enough to have. But there are things which you assume are part of the settled way that we do things in this country. I think that two things undermine that. First of all, I think that many of us, and I would include myself as part of the government for 13 years, we were not sufficiently reactive and responsive to the fear of immigration and the threat that change was bringing to people up and down the country. To some extent, in my constituency in London, the large part of my former constituency voted by 79.9% to remain in the United Kingdom. A glorious, ethnically diverse, constituency that represents London. So in a sense, this fury, this anger, this sense of helplessness that so many people have described never it never arose. And in all those years, I never had anybody write to me, come to a surgery, saying we've got to get out of the European Union. And I think that what's happened is that there's a great rubbish bin labelled European Union, into which every bit of fury, frustration, alienation, sadness that people have has been dumped. You know, the shortage of local primary school places, waiting to see their GP, their anxiety about their next job. Will their children ever be able to own a home? And somehow what this referendum has done is to enable all that fury and despondency to be dumped in this bin labelled the European Union, linked to a sense, and I think that, you know, this is perhaps the most powerful driver in our country today, a sense that there's a feeling among the 90% of people in our country that the elite 10%, most of whom live in London or other cities, have a kind of gilded life that they can never be part of. And Andrew, if I can say this in all respect, you and I are part of that. And, you know, it is at our peril that we ever get disconnected from it. So I think there is as much a challenge from those of us who live in London, who've represented, worked in London and other cities, to respond and listen and to begin to rebuild confidence in our politics with all the humility that it will take.
OK, that's Baroness Tessa Jow, former Labour Culture Secretary, former MP for Dulwich and West Norwood, with a very, very powerful criticism there of Jeremy Corbyn's conduct in that referendum campaign, and also expressing her horror that we've left. Do you share that horror that we've left, or are you absolutely like Boris Johnson? It's Independence Day. Your turn to have your say. 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Email andrew@lbc.co.uk, or you tweet at LBC. The lines are open now. Want to talk to you. What do you want to tell me? Time is now 8:16. With you, Andrew Pearce, here until 10 o'clock. It is an historic day. I have to say, I've been a journalist since, I was telling you now, since 1979. I've covered some amazing stories in my time. The fall of Mrs. Thatcher, the death of Princess Diana, the fall of the Berlin Wall. I cannot recall an event of such seismic proportions as what we've done today. We've pulled out of the European Union. We've turned our back on 43 years of foreign policy, the established order, which Tessa Jow was saying she never thought we would ever alter. And we've unseated a Prime Minister. Stock markets across Europe are in retreat. The pound's been falling. And we could even see a new leader of the opposition. Not sure that'll happen, but what a day. I'm asking you for your view. Is this a good day, a great day for you? You're pleased we voted to leave? If so, why so? And if you are one of those who voted to remain, because let's face it, in London in particular, it was a stronghold for Remain, tell me what you're frightened of, what you fear. 0345 6060 973. Let's go to Adrian in East Grinstead first. Evening, Adrian.
Hi there, Andrew.
How are you doing?
Yeah. It's a very deeply depressing day as far as I'm concerned.
Go on.
People have voted slogans. They have no idea. And it's the people who are poorest that are going to get hit the hardest. They have no idea what they bought. So they vote, one of the banks today, it leaked out they were going to send 2,000 jobs overseas. They denied it. But why did it leak out in the first place? Now, the Frankfurt guys have said, yeah, we want those jobs. And that's exactly where the bank looks to send them. These are guys who are very, very high earners. So losing 2,000 of them is maybe like losing 25,000 ordinary people's jobs in terms of the taxes. So if they're not going to pay the taxes that pay for the health service, that pay for welfares and pensions, if they're not going to pay the taxes, just who is? Corbyn, of course, is a complete, utter waste of space. He was when he was first put in there. He'll be gone. He just doesn't know how to campaign anything at all. And just one more point on this, well, loads if you got them, but one particular point on this notion of control. Most people don't listen to detailed arguments from AO4, but I heard this guy did an analysis of decisions in some part of the European establishment over a period of years. Britain lost the decision 50 times. That sounds bad, but in fact the decision went our way more than 2,500 times. Now, that means on 98% of time, we got what we wanted. Now, if you're working in a partnership with 27 other people, and you get your way 98% of the time, of course, that's too boring a statistic for Mr. Johnson to talk about. But if you get your way 98% of the time, you'd think you'd done pretty well. And, of course, in terms of control, we're going to have to do what Norway and Switzerland does, And the politicians in Europe can't afford to give us a good deal so easily. So, it's a very, very, very bad day, and the people are going to pay, and the people who've got no money, because the people who have their money can move and take their taxes anywhere they want.
OK, Adrian, thanks for starting that conversation off. Mary is in Putney. Do you agree with that, Mary?
Hello, Andrew. It's really nice to speak with you. No, I don't, actually. I don't agree with that at all. I don't really like the condescending way some people speak about it as well, that people voted for slogans. I think that a lot of people knew entirely what they were doing. And I think that Tessa Jowl doesn't get it at all from listening to her. Jeremy Corbyn probably couldn't have made any difference. People have made up their mind. They're voting for specific reasons, and they've gone out and put that cross in the box because they knew their vote was going to count for once. I mean, I voted Labour at the last election, but I know where I live, it will make not a spot of difference because it's a very conservative area and will, I imagine, continue to be so for a very long time and has been historically. So I know my vote doesn't generally count here, but I went out and I did my postal vote about 3 weeks ago, and I was very pleased to do it because I knew for once it was actually going to count in the democratic process.
And why did you, Mary? What was the clincher for you to vote to leave the European Union?
Well, I think there's lots and lots of reasons. I do want to take back the cliche, take back control, a slogan. There you go. But also, I am worried about the level of immigration. I think it is over the top, and I don't apologise for saying it. And I think that Nigel Farage has really been cast as a bad guy when I think for 25 years he's been working tirelessly for something that I think he thinks is good for the country. And I think he's been cast very wrongly by the media in many ways and other politicians and lots of other people as a racist, which I genuinely 100% believe that he isn't. And, I think that David Cameron has tried to manipulate things. And I think that the party machine tried to manipulate things, and I think people saw through it. I mean, I got fed up with seeing these people with jumpers saying, I'm in, all over my high street. It just made me want to throw up. And frankly, even if I thought that I wanted to remain, on seeing that, it was like red rag to a bull. I thought, that's it, you're throwing all of our money at it. We're paying for these stickers and these balloons and these leaflets and all this stuff. It was like some sort of carnival on canvassing day. There was about 25 of them in the Putney High Street. I thought, what is going on here? Normally you don't see any of these people. Nobody cares whether you live or die. Even on canvassing day for a general election, nobody comes round. They don't care. But there, they were throwing everything at it, and it was our money that was going for it. Whereas the Leave campaign, it was obvious they were running on a shoestring budget, and yet they still managed to pull it off. My message to Tessa Jowl is this, very, very clearly, that she shouldn't blame Jeremy Corbyn for it. She should blame all of her MPs, all of the people in the Commons for it, because they don't listen to what ordinary, everyday people who have to scrape a living together think. They just patronise us all the time, and they think we're a bunch of thickos.
Well, Marie, thank you for that. That's Marie, a Labour voter who voted to leave, saying that the Labour Party treats voters as thickos. She wasn't very polite about the Prime Minister either. Asking you what you think, that it's nearly, the official result was declared at 7:20. Some of us were on College Green at Westminster at 5 o'clock this morning when it was pretty obvious that Leave had won. What is your reaction? If you did vote to remain, what are you most worried about? And if you voted to leave, what's the best thing about it? And if you didn't vote at all, why not? Ring and tell me why. 0345 6060 973. Shahid is in Hemel Hempstead.
Hi, I am absolutely furious at these so-called centre-left MPs who think that they're always right, call themselves moderate, and always blame the core vote for their mistakes. Let me tell Tessa Jowl, I really hope she's listening, coming from somebody who begged Tony Blair to stay in 2004, 1 year after the Iraq War, when it's becoming very apparent there was no WMD, her, Charles Clarke, John Reid, they all begged Tony Blair to stay after Labour had the floor wiped with them in the 2004 local and European elections. You haven't got a clue. Who was the leader of the Labour Party last year when Labour lost 56, when the SNP gained 56 seats in Scotland and Labour lost all but one seat in Scotland? They had 41 MPs in Scotland last year and they lost 40 of them. They've only got one. UKIP gained 3 million voters last year. They were mainly Labour voters. It was Ed Miliband. The fault goes all the way back to the failures of Blair and Brown. because I used to be part of the party, and when it came to warning that the EU was expanding by too much and don't let in too many new countries, they ignored it. They sidestepped the question. They didn't put on the transitional controls. They kept the minimum wage too low. They didn't replace the council housing. And whenever I used to go to these meetings, they didn't want to hear any of that. They just go, don't moan about what we're not doing. Praise us for what we are doing. Things like that is the reason why we're getting punished now. And for as long as the likes of Tessa Jowell and Margaret Hodge, who's married to a millionaire, and Tim Farron think it's all about the middle swing Tory voters, they're going to destroy any chance the centre-left have of getting back into power. Look at the Lib Dems. They had 56, 57 MPs, they got 8. What does this tell you? It's not Corbyn's fault, it's those idiots that keep on selling out. Alistair Campbell, I heard him earlier on with Ian Dale, he was like saying, I like being in power. Let me tell you, Alistair Campbell and Tessa Jowell, there's no point getting into power if you're going to sell out on your core voters and water down your core policies and give us virtually nothing. That is the reason why the Tories got in through the back door, because of this referendum issue, because UKIP gained 3 million voters.
All right.
That's the only reason why Cameron won, and as for Cameron, I've got no sympathy for him whatsoever, because all he's done was make it very easy for EU citizens to come to this country, while he's made the rules very hard for non-EU.
Okay, Shahid, just for pressure time, I'm going to move on, but thank you for your call. Very powerful. And please call. I want to know your view about the result today. Are you pleased, thrilled, excited, nervous? What's the advantage? We're leaving. We're standing on our own 2 feet. Are you proud to be British? You're going to fly the Union flag? Or are you terrified? And if you've got children, are you worried about their future? 0345 6060 973. The time is now 8:30. I'm Andrew Pearce. This is LBC. And here with your latest news headlines, Simon Conway.
President with Andrew Pearce.
It is without doubt, I was racking my brains during the commercial break, without doubt, the biggest event in my lifetime. What could compare with this in the last 45, 50 years in Britain? I can't think of anything. Politically, the fall of Mrs. Thatcher was a huge story. I covered that. The death of Princess Diana was enormous, but nothing on the scale of leaving the European Union. It's been the settled order since 1973. That's when we joined. It was then called the Common Market. I think there were 10 countries. There are now 28, rising to 33, and we're leaving. We could be gone in 2 years. It may take longer. It depends whether they activate something called Article 50, which starts the process straight away, and we have to go in 2 years. I'm asking you, are you thrilled to bits? Did you ever think this day would come? Or are you appalled, angry, worried, nervous? And if you are, what are you nervous about? And if you are thrilled, what's the best bit about this? Do call 0345 6060 973. Pamela is in Neasden. Hi, Pamela.
Hi, Andrew. You know, I was going to say something else, but having been put on hold for a while, listen to your previous callers, including Tessa Jowell, and there was a young man, and I can't remember all their names. This morning, when I woke up, I had the radio on LBC, actually. I turned it off at some point. At some point, 4:30, I woke up, I thought, my God, the radio is still on. I checked on my phone, I thought, my God, we left. So I woke up to have a coffee. I had to wake my daughter up to go to school, and I said to her, wake up, we've left. And she said, oh no, she slapped her forehead. She said, oh no. And then when she came downstairs after she had a shower, she said, it's 58, sorry, not 58, 48, 52. And I said, how do you know? You checked. She's 12 years old. It bothered her that much. As we walked to the station, she said to me, oh, Mum, you know, a few months ago, my friends and I were discussing it, and we were thinking, oh, how awful it would be for us to leave. I don't know if you can tell from my accent, but I'm of Nigerian origin. I have a British grandmother. I'm so gutted. You know, I've listened to LBC. I'm actually saying things I didn't want to say because I was actually going to rant and rave initially about the people who voted out. James O'Brien did a really good program earlier on today when he was asking people, why did you vote out? How do you feel now? And he really, James is great. He managed to how do I say, dispel all the myths they had. It became very apparent listening to Jane. I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little bit emotional. I'm so angry.
What are you most angry about, Pamela? What worries you most of all now we're leaving the European Union?
Because I think people voted from emotion. I think they voted on lies. Nigel Farage has been on, I don't really watch that much TV. I tend to listen to radio more. Something, I don't know what it's called. You know, when they asked him about the £350 million, he said, oh, it was a mistake. Oh, really? 70 million people had a oops, sorry. I'm paraphrasing. That's what makes me angry. And then, since then, you know, I didn't think it could get any worse. When I woke up this morning, and my God, Britain had chosen to leave. And then secondly, David Cameron resigned, which I don't think he should have resigned. And then thirdly, Nigel Farage is now saying, oh, no, that was a mistake. Oh, no, the bus was a mistake. And then some other guy, I can't remember his name, says, oh, no, migration would not be reduced. And then I then read more. Sorry, I'm going to be hysterical. Let me calm down. My voice is going a little bit high-pitched. You know, and then someone else, you know, I see again, you know, in the news, oh, we didn't know our vote will count, really? And then Huffington Post, that was the first place I saw it, says, oh, the Brits are now Googling, what does EU mean? And I'm thinking, are you guys crazy? You didn't actually Google it before you voted? Are you mad?
So Pamela, in 2 years' time we could be out. What do you think that will directly mean to you and your daughter?
My daughters, actually. My daughters, I have to.
Okay.
Well, both of my daughters wanted to be in. They had discussed it at school. What will it mean for me directly? It's a very good question. To be honest with you, a friend of mine hates when they say, to be honest, that means you're not honest sometimes. I'm not sure because nobody really knows. Even the experts don't actually know.
So maybe that's the fear, Pamela. It's the unknown.
It is the unknown, of course. There's no economy that can work, with the fear of the unknown.
Well, Pamela, just for pressure of time, because a lot of people want to get in on this conversation, but keep in touch with LBC and keep listening to LBC, because this is an historic day. It is an historic day, whether you like it or not. It is, and the biggest change in our constitution since we went in the common market. In fact, I think it's a much bigger change, because back then the common market didn't get involved in anything like the way it gets involved in our daily lives now. So, how does it impact on you? 03456060973. Aline is in Mill Hill. Good evening, Aline.
Hi. I've been listening all day, and I've been so desperate to get in on the conversation. So
well, you're in on it now, Aline. So, what would you like to say?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm 15, and I very, very, very strongly want to remain in the EU. I just think that my whole generation have wanted to remain. I mean, we did it in school kind of referendum, and it was a 91% remain. And we've been completely cheated because we haven't had a vote. And I mean, I really believe that our whole generation's future has been decided by the older generations, who probably won't see the main effects of Brexit. So, why
did you feel so strongly, Aline, that you wanted to stay in the European Union? What was the advantage for you, do you think, and for young people?
I mean, the main reasons were obviously education and the travelling and jobs. And I just think, I personally am really interested in medicine, and I can just see the junior doctor problem getting worse and worse with this Brexit, just because we're going to have even more pressure on the services now that we're going to have so many less workers here.
Yeah, but you could also argue that there'll be fewer people coming to live here, Aline, which will put less pressure on the NHS, less pressure on the schools, and less pressure on jobs and wages.
Of course, I also actually, in that sense, I feel that so many people are feeling like unwelcome from our country now. I just don't think it's how we want Britain to appear. And it kind of makes me feel ashamed that, we it's almost xenophobic. I mean, I know that's extreme, but I genuinely feel like that's how we're appearing right now.
But you don't, I mean, older people who have to worry about this getting their children into schools, that's why a lot of them voted to leave, Eileen, because they were worried that immigration is so high now that there's not enough school places and jobs and NHS appointments to go round.
But I think that now that this is happening, in the next 2 years, our immigration level is going to be through the roof because people are trying to get into the country while they still can. So I really don't think that the problem's been solved.
Well, that's a very good point. What about, do you live with your mum and dad? Did they vote in the referendum?
Yeah, they did. I made sure they did.
Did they vote with the same way as you?
Yeah, they did.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And do you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I've got a brother.
And what would he have voted?
I think he would, again, be Remain. I don't know if he kind of feels as strongly as I do, but I definitely think it would be Remain.
Yeah. And what were the at the school, did your teachers take a view, or did they stay neutral?
It was, like, all online, so there was no campaigning, there was nothing. It was literally just people's opinions.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and I just think that reflects so much, and it's just a shame that it wasn't, being shown in the real results.
Well, Eileen, thank you so much for calling. I'm glad you stuck with LBC all day, and I know the lines are very busy, so it's been hard to get through, but I'm very grateful for that call. What an articulate, passionate young lady, Eileen, 15, from Mill Hill. 91% the referendum in her school. If there's more of you school-age children, teenagers, do call, because I know a lot of you feel very put out about the fact that you think we old fogies have denied you something. The number to remind again, 0345 6060 973. Stephen's in Portsmouth. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, well, funnily enough, I'm also a student. I'm 16 years old, and I'm a Leave supporter.
Oh, are you? Well, that's interesting.
Yes, and it's interesting because they were saying that all young people vote to Remain, which is just rubbish, because I know lots of people in my school definitely want to vote Leave. Well, I've had people complain all day on Facebook about how this vote, the old people have sort of taken away our democracy from us, or taken away our country. It's ridiculous. It's almost like they're saying older people shouldn't have a voice in our country, and they definitely should. And if they wanted a Remain vote, then they should have gone out and campaigned for it. These people, they're just complaining about it. I've been campaigning for months now for vote. All my friends who want Remain are saying, oh, we should have got Remain, but you didn't do anything about it. That's their problem.
Stephen, why were you so keen to leave, Stephen?
Well, today, it's free trade deals, pretty much. Today, you can see, no one's talking about this. You know Tony Abbott, Australian Prime Minister, he says on Twitter, there will be more chance of an Oz free trade agreement with Britain than with the EU. And that just proves that the Leave side was right. We will have more free trade deals once we leave. Long term, our economy will actually be boosted by more free trade deals because they will be in Britain's interest, not in the European Union's interest. For example, the European Union would veto trade deals with countries that we would want to do trade with, like Australia. And now we might have short-term sort of economic shock, but long-term our economy will grow because of these free trade deals, and that's the main reason I would want to stay in, and of course democracy.
All right, Stephen, what about the fact sterling went to the levels not seen on the foreign exchanges since Mrs Thatcher was Prime Minister? Does that worry you?
No, frankly it doesn't, because the sterling has actually started to increase already. It's bounced back, and obviously the FTSE 100 has gone back to levels higher than February. And no, it's just short-term economic shock. It will all be sorted out very soon, I imagine. Within the next few months, it's just short-termism. This vote is a long-term vote. A lot of people voted on a short-term issue, and clearly people have seen that the Leave campaign was right in the sense that it's a long-term vote. We're going to have a long-term increase in the economy. There might be a short-term shock because there's uncertainty, but as soon as we get those free trade deals, which Tony Abbott's proving today, and with America, etc., with the Commonwealth, then our economy will actually grow and there'll be more jobs.
All right, Stephen, well, thank you very much for that call, too. That's another very powerful, articulate call. 16-year-old. 15 and 16, two conflicting views. Any more teenagers there who want to call? 0345 6060 973. Do you feel cheated or thrilled by what's happened? And I don't mind what age you are. Do call us. Text 84850, tweet at LBC, or you email andrew@lbc.co.uk. It's Friday evening. The time is now 8:46.
From the LBC. Andrew Pearce on LBC.
Well, talking to you about the referendum, and I think it was at about 5:30 this morning, or maybe it was a little later, I bumped into Craig McKinley, who's the Conservative MP for South Thanet, who of course famously beat Nigel Farage, the UKIP leader, in the general election last year. Prominent Eurosceptic and of course former UKIP member himself. Joins me now. Craig, good evening.
Good evening, Andrew.
Are you still on a high?
Very much so. I think the high is fading. Now I've been up for 38 hours, and I think yours is my last gig of the day. So, yes, fading rapidly, but it's been a massively exciting day. 25 years of what I've believed in, that Britain should have had this referendum. We've had that referendum. It's been delivered with an out. I mean, obviously the only sadness of the day is that the Prime Minister has tendered his resignation. That saddened me, because I'm not sure, in my mind, that was necessary at this stage, but obviously a matter for him. But we do need a Brexit leader in the future to lead that renegotiation over the 2 odd years ahead, while we get our new arrangement with the EU and other nations around the world. It's an exciting time, and I think it's something that we should all be celebrating.
The Prime Minister will have to appoint people to lead the negotiations if they start straight away, because clearly he's going to step back from them. Do you think, Craig, they have to be people who are steeped in the European referendum campaign and, of course, were prominent Brexiters?
Well, there will be some negotiations going on before the Prime Minister hands over, obviously at the party conference, but in his speech this morning, he made it quite clear that the Article 50 under the Lisbon Treaty, which is really the starting gun of the 2 years, won't actually happen until that new successor is in place. But between here and then, I think it would be very sensible to have a Brexit team that will actually fulfil on what the people of this country have actually demanded, that there is a complete renegotiation, a new deal completely with the EU, the opportunity to make new deals around the world, and to start that very amicable divorce, because this needn't be messy. I think we've got the opportunity here to actually get better relations with our great EU friends and neighbours. And let's be very honest, we've been the reluctant Europeans almost since we joined this EU project 43 years ago, and I think we've got an opportunity here to put that right and let them go ahead and do those things that they seem to be wanting: single currencies, creating a country called Europe, and I wish them all the very best in that endeavour. I don't think it's worked for Britain, so I'm taking this as a very positive step for Britain, because I think we always have been somewhat different.
Are you surprised or encouraged, perhaps I could rephrase the question, Craig, the President of the United States, President Obama, has said the special relationship will continue? If I read his comments more closely during the referendum campaign, he gave, I thought, the distinct impression, if we had the temerity to leave the European Union, that the special relationship wouldn't continue, and as for a trade deal, would be at the back of the queue.
Well, I think that was the clear inference that was trying to be given during his visit over here. Not least because I don't think Americans say back of the queue; they tend to say back of the line. So it did make us wonder at the time who might have
wrote the word for him. Yeah,
yeah. But no, I think every American president, past, present, and future. I wouldn't really want to be an American this year, but that's another story for another time, as to what vote to make. I think they realise that Britain has always been that fundamentally democratic country that's always there to put its back into the work of putting things that are wrong around the world, and the US will be able to rely on us into the future, and I think that they know that rather more than they can be sure of that with any other EU nation. So I think that will continue. I think Obama was perhaps allowing himself to be used as a bit of a pawn in a domestic referendum, and I think that was a mistake of him, frankly.
And if I could just ask you finally, Craig, if you had to sum up in one sentence, and I appreciate you've been campaigning for this outcome for many years, and I guess at some points you probably thought it would never happen, what is the single most important benefit from the historic decision the British people took in the last 24 hours?
Very simply, it gives you the right to sack me. Because we now will have a parliament that is sovereign and accountable to you, and that's what democracy is all about.
Well put. That's Craig McKinley, Conservative MP for South Thanet. Over to you, the conversation. What's the most significant thing for you about his decision today? It is historic. It is the end of the long relationship with the European Union. 43 years. It's a long time, isn't it? What's the advantage? Or what's the biggest disadvantage? 0345 6060 973. David in Dulwich.
Hi, Andrew. Great programme.
Thank you.
Radio station. Love it loads. Okay, I won't say much, but I'll probably try and remind the UK about the position, the very special position that it's in at the moment. The Queen is the head of state for several major economies, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. It's the head of the Commonwealth. Well, obviously Commonwealth is headed by the UK. You've got huge opportunities for the British business entities to do free trade deals with Malaysia, Singapore, Nigeria, South Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. All these countries would easily be able to put billions of dollars worth of trade into the UK bank balance sheet to make it a much better and stronger economy than it is today. Yes, you voted out, but you voted out because, number one, the European values were not very compatible with the UK values. Britain is a very special country. Very rarely have I travelled on the European continent whereby you meet people who will say, oh, thank you very much. We'll even if they know how to speak English. I've been to France before. I've met a waiter who I heard speak English a minute ago. A couple of seconds I came back and asked him for my bill, and he answered me in French that I definitely do not understand. It was a clash of cultures. I mean, it was never really going to be long for Britain to decide that the European project was not something they wanted to sign up to. You have the Queen, who is very loved and revered by loads of countries around the world. I'm a commodities trader. Every country I travel to, I find two people who have very aggressive ways with which they do business, so the Chinese and the Americans. And I ask them all the time, how come it's just China and America? There's always, if you're looking for gold, you travel to this part of the province, you find a Chinese man signing a contract, an American man signing a contract. Where is the British man signing a contract for his own country? None. Oh, the EU states, Britain can only do a deal because of this and that.
So this is liberation, David. David, on that point, I'm just going to move on just for pressure time, because this switchboard is on the point of blowing up. Lots of you want to get involved in the conversation. David, thank you very much for that call, and you're quite right too. The Commonwealth, I think, is now a very important area where we can boost our trade, and where we could have boosted our trade a long time ago if we'd never joined the common market. I have no view about whether we should have joined it or not, because I think I was 10 when we went in. Now, have I got this name right? Srood is in Camden Town. Hello, Srood.
Hi, Andrew, you've got it right.
Good.
I'm 17.
Another teenager. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Honestly, I feel really cheated.
Why?
The older generation has basically taken hold of my future. They're dictating my future for me, and I can't even have a say. I think it's a downright scandal that the vote wasn't even lowered to 16-year-olds, at least for this referendum, seeing as how this will dictate the next 3, 4, possibly the rest of my life.
Well, the voting age in this country, Srood, is 18.
I know, but there were many calls before this referendum for it to be lowered to 16. Those calls were denied, and it should not have happened.
Why do you think they've ruined your life?
Pardon?
Well, you said this decision could ruin your life, did you say?
Well, yeah, I did say that, because...
It's a bit dramatic, isn't it? That's a bit melodramatic, isn't it?
Well, it's just the fact that this is a momentous decision. It's pure political upheaval, and I can't have my say. So, yes, I do feel like they are dictating my life for me, because they are essentially saying what's going to happen, and I can't have a say in that.
But what's the problem? Why do you think this is going to just ruin your life, Srood? What is the big issue for you that is unfairly been imposed on you by all the old codgers who voted the way you didn't want them to vote?
Well, I think part of it is because of the massive unknown. I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning, I saw we left, and I'd seen that the stock markets had just plummeted, the pound had plummeted.
But that's because the markets got it wrong yesterday. They all banked on a yes vote, so they took their positions, and of course they got it wrong, so they lost a lot of money. So now, of course, they're trading down to try and get their money back. I don't have a lot of sympathy for the traders on the market who got burnt because they gambled on the wrong way.
That's true, but for me personally, things like universities, it's now unclear where if they're going to remain competitive, if fees are going to go up. Because before that, all of that was helped by us being in the EU, by remaining global. And that's created a lot of uncertainty for me. Yes, there's a 2-year exit process, but even still, that uncertainty does create fear.
All right, Srood. Well, thank you again for your point. You like your the two previous teenagers. You make your point very well, very articulate, and very passionately and very powerfully. I wonder how many more of you young men and women feel you've been badly hard done by that decision. Now we're coming up to 9 o'clock. Coming up, the Prime Minister, an emotional Prime Minister, said he will remain in office for the next 3 months to steady the ship while the Conservative Party choose a new leader. Britain needs fresh leadership. So who is it? We are going to get a new Prime Minister when he or she is sworn in with the Queen in October. Should there immediately be a general election? To hell with a fixed-term Parliament. They have to get they have to get authentication from the electorate. And what of Jeremy Corbyn, the Labour leader, facing a motion of no confidence next week? Time to kick him out because he's useless? Who should replace him? I'm Andrew Pearce. This is LBC. That's all next.
On FM, online, on your mobile and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC. Or 850 tweet at LBC.
So he came out. We watched and we heard the Prime Minister speaking. It was an emotional performance. He was very dignified and very measured. Samantha Cameron looked very close to tears too. He decided he had to go, he had to resign. I'm asking you, did he have to go so soon? Could he not have waited a little longer? And now he's going. Who should replace him? Should it be the blonde bombshell, Boris Johnson? The Tories did quite well when they had a blonde before. She was called Mrs Thatcher. She won 3 elections. Michael Gove, Theresa May. And what of Jeremy Corbyn? A lousy performance by the Labour leader. The Labour heartland's voting massively to leave. Is it time to get rid of him too? And if so, who takes over from him? Well, I'm delighted to say joining me now is a very experienced political observer and a former MP himself, Matthew Parris. He's a columnist with The Times and a former Tory MP, and an old mate of mine. Matthew, good evening.
Good evening. It sounds like you got a big agenda for us this evening.
What?
True. Where shall we start?
Yeah, well, I know there's a lot. Well, let's start with David Cameron. Did you expect that this morning?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I did.
Never had a moment's doubt. And he won't have made that decision this morning or last night. He will have known from the start that if the referendum was lost, he would have to resign straight away. And the only question was whether he actually stood down straight away or announced his resignation for a few months' time. And he took the latter course. But there will not have been a moment's hesitation in his mind about that. I mean, for the last few months, he has been arguing that leaving the European Union would be like taking a ship onto the rocks. You can't then say, well, I'd like to carry on steering the ship if you think the course is towards the rocks.
And all the MPs that have been coming on this programme today, Matthew, and I was on College Green this morning at Westminster, packed, as you know what it's like when these big things happen, all saying, oh, I don't think he needs to go, I don't need to go. I was saying, what do you mean? He's going to have to resign this morning. He's lost the referendum. As you say, he said Armageddon was coming and World War III possibly too, I think we were going to get, weren't we? So he had to go. Do you think he did it the right way in giving us a few months? Because the market's already been spooked by our decision to leave the European Union. By saying he'll stay on till October, that at least gives some time for things to settle down?
Yeah, I think the reason he did it like that was not to look as though the British government or Britain was in some kind of panic or crisis. And from the point of view of trying to keep the markets fairly calm, he's been Prime Minister for 6 years. The idea that he would carry on for a few months and keep everything on an even keel, I think is probably has a calming effect on the market. So that will have been the reason that he did it. As for all these tributes to him and all these Leave people saying, oh, he's been marvellous, yes, we owe so much to him, he must carry total hypocrisy, absolute crocodile tears. They know perfectly well. They've shafted him.
Yeah,
they've kicked him in the nuts. And
Tory party are pretty good at shafting leaders, aren't they?
Yes, they are, yes.
I mean, unlike the Labour Party, we'll come on to them in a minute, Matthew. The front-runner, obviously, to succeed is Boris Johnson, who some people were surprised was in favour of leaving the EU and leading the campaign. He's had a pretty good campaign. Michael Gove, if he decides to run, a former colleague of ours, of course, Matthew, when we worked with him on the Times. And Theresa May, maybe others will come forward. What's your hunch about who gets it, and who would you like to get it?
Well, I would add one name to the three. The three you've cited perfectly right. The fourth name I would add would be Stephen Crabb. No one has heard of him. It's a funny-sounding name. He is the new Work and Pension Secretary. He was the Secretary of State for Wales before. He is very much liked by his colleagues. He's good in the House of Commons. He's a middle-of-the-road, slightly left-of-centre, pro-Remain Conservative. He has a rather Christian background, but not in a preachy way. He comes from quite a deprived background, council house, comprehensive school, all that kind of thing. Good backstory. So that's someone just to keep in the back of your mind. I would also not rule out Theresa May. I think Theresa May could be quite a strong compromise candidate. You know, and I know, that Boris Johnson is not particularly popular with his parliamentary colleagues.
But what if Michael Gove, they've worked very well together during the referendum, I know they're not particularly great friends, what if Michael Gove backed Boris, was his running mate, if you like? That would make them a pretty unstoppable force, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you and I both know Michael. Michael says that he doesn't want to be Prime Minister. He probably would like to be, but I don't think he's going to go for it. And I think that if Boris wants to run, and obviously he does, I don't think Michael would challenge him. So that would be the temptation for Michael, would be to be the deputy, the running mate. They would make an interesting combination, but to some extent they'll appeal to the same people. They are both. Boris has made himself a controversial and slightly divisive candidate, and well, I always say about Michael Gove, whom I admire and like very much, but when he gets on his high horse, you could just. There's a faint smell of burning witches somewhere in the background. The two of them are a bit sounding a bit kind of extreme and ideological. Theresa May has kept herself above the strife. She has been nominally Remain, but she hasn't said very much about it. That she's not been in the news. She's been Home Secretary for as long as anybody can remember. She's a safe pair of hands, and she might just come through the middle.
Yeah, and which do you know yet who you would vote for?
At the moment, I vote for Stephen Crabb in about 5 years' time.
Right.
Tomorrow, it would be Theresa May for me, I think.
And are you still going to stay in the Tory party, Matthew? Because we had a conversation on this programme some time ago where you said if the party leaves, if the country votes to leave the European Union, led by Tories like Michael Gove and Boris Johnson, you may not remain in the Tory party. Is that?
Yeah, I think I was a bit careful not to say that I would stalk out. I don't like people who stalk out and resign from.
No, quite.
I'm not a leaver. But if the Conservative Party goes completely mad, and there are some signs of that happening, and if there is then a split within the Conservative Party and a whole group of people decide that they can't stomach it any longer, I would join them. But I'm not going. I mean, I'm only a journalist. I'm just the hired help. I don't think me storming out is very interesting to anybody.
What of Jeremy Corbyn? I just caught a glimpse on Sky Television of Corbyn going into the House of Commons, journalists pursuing him, Corbyn doing what he always does when journalists pursuing him, ignoring them. He often looks quite furtive when he comes out of his house. I don't know why he just doesn't say good morning. Would just be something to say, wouldn't it? You now know that Margaret Hodge and one other MP are tabling a motion of no confidence. It gets debated by the Parliamentary Labour Party on Monday evening, which could then lead to a full-scale secret ballot, which could then lead to him being forced out, or at least a leadership contest. Should they get rid of him?
I'm not sure. I mean, you know the reason why he looks so furtive with us. We journalists, we are just spawn of Satan as far as he's concerned.
You speak for yourself. You speak for yourself, Matthew.
The forces of evil. But the difficulty with getting rid of him, I don't know whether the vote will take place in the end or whether it will be successful. But nobody needs to be. They don't need to demonstrate to us that his parliamentary colleagues regret that he was ever elected as the leader. We all know that. but he's very popular with the party in the country. And as I think John McDonnell said earlier today, they can pass a motion of no confidence in him if they like. They can have another leadership election if they like, but he'll win it again. So I'm not quite sure if this is going anywhere, but it is at least a sign that elements in the Parliamentary Labour Party are not prepared to take this lying down any longer.
I spoke earlier to Tessa Jow. As you know, she's a Blairite, but she's been a member of the Labour Party for a very long time. She was almost distraught with the result of the referendum. She's passionate about the European Union, and she was furious and said it was a scandal the way the Labour leadership had not got hold of this referendum properly, and she blamed Jeremy Corbyn for a lot of that, the lack of enthusiasm, the lack of interest, and she is going to go to that meeting. She didn't tell me whether she'd be voting to get rid of him. I think she probably would if there was a vote. Do you see, in the way that the Leave vote was so strong in Labour areas, that was a reflection of Corbyn's leadership?
It was to some extent, but Andrew, it's not a lack of enthusiasm or laziness on Jeremy Corbyn's part. He doesn't care if we do leave the European Union. He's not keen on the European Union. And you notice how he has never said, I'm passionate for the Union. He's always said, I'm supporting the Labour Party's position, which is that we should stay in the European Union. I think he would he would be quite pleased with the result that we've got, and he's hoping, and he'll probably get a general election in the next year or so as a result of it. And he sees Europe as a capitalist club. All the left see Europe as a capitalist club, and he has been quite deliberately walking a tightrope between being for and being against. I mean, look at the way he went on holiday during the referendum.
I know, staggering. Yeah. Just finally, Matthew,
a signal.
Yeah. You touched on it, and I was going to ask you just finally, when the new Prime Minister is in place at the Tory Party conference, whether it's May or Boris or whoever it is, do you think they should go to the country very soon?
Yes. Yeah, I think Theresa May could just about get away with carrying on. She's been a serious member of the cabinet for a long time. She was part of the group that we, as it were, elected in 2015, and you could say she's the continuity candidate. But Boris Johnson has never been. He's never even been a shadow cabinet minister, let alone a cabinet minister. Stephen Crabb, no one has heard of. So I don't think you can. I don't think just halfway through you can simply replace one leader with another and say, right, folks, right, Britain. Boris is now Prime Minister. No, I think there's got to be an election to validate it. He needs a mandate.
All right, that's Matthew Parris, Times columnist and former Tory MP. Well, over to you. So we know Cameron is going. Dignified departure, very moving speech. His wife, I thought, was about to burst into tears at any time. It must have been a very emotional time for them. And I think Matthew Parris is right. He always knew he was going to stand down once, if they lost the referendum. Who should replace him? Is it Boris? Is it Theresa May? Is it Michael Gove? Is it somebody else? Stephen Crabb, Matthew Parris mentioned, if you've even heard of him. And what of the election? Should there be a general election? Now, remember, we have a fixed-term parliament, so parliament has to run for 5 years. But the leader of the opposition, if he or she agrees that there should be a general election, it's as simple as that. It folds. There could be an election. There could be an election this autumn. More likely, in my view, it would be next spring. Should the new Prime Minister call a general election to get their own mandate? And what of Jeremy Corbyn? Comrade Corbyn, they call him. Others call him Comedy Corbyn. He's facing difficulties of his own next week. Should the Labour Party get rid of him? Should he resign? And if so, who's going to replace him? 0345 6060 973. I'm Andrew Pearce. It's LBC. It's Friday evening. Time is 9:15. So in a remarkable day of twists and turns politically, we leave the European Union. Seismic political event. It's caused great upset in Paris and Germany, and of course the French and German leaders have their own elections coming up. They won't welcome the British result, let me tell you, because they'll be worried it will stir Euroscepticism in their own backyards, particularly Mrs Merkel. She's been there far too long. But what of then we get the Prime Minister resigning, and then we discover later this afternoon 2 Labour MPs are tabling a motion of no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn, which could lead to a full-scale vote on whether he should carry on as leader or not. If they decide there should be a confidence debate, he can carry on and he can put his name on the ballot paper and fight again. And in my view, he'll win. So, who should replace Cameron? And should there be a general election straight away? Or should he not have stood down? And what about Jeremy Corbyn? Is he useless? Look at the results in the Labour heartlands. Birmingham, Sheffield, Bolton, where else was Sunderland? Amazing results there for Leave. And there were those reports, Tessa Jow was talking about it earlier, the former Labour cabinet minister, saying that a lot of Labour people didn't even know what their party's policy was. Shocking. When the Labour Party was absolutely committed to staying in, only 10 Labour MPs wanted to leave. Half of Tory MPs wanted to leave, and actually the true number was higher than that, really, but as a lot of them were government ministers, they had to toe the payroll line. So, should Corbyn go? Should Cameron have stood down? Who should replace him? And should we have a general election? 0345 6060 973. Chris is in Southend. Hi, Chris.
Good evening, Andrew. Thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
Well, what I was going to say, Andrew, is that what this highlights is that the fact that the Labour Party are very out of touch with the majority of their voters. Most of their voters do suffer from uncontrolled mass migration. These are concerns that lots of working class Labour voters have. I do accept that we need stronger trade unions and we need a higher living wage, but you cannot deny the fact that if you have unrestricted numbers from Eastern Europe coming to Britain, it is going to affect wages. And the Labour Party, for me, are out of touch with this. Now, I actually do agree with some of Corbyn's policies. I do think we should renationalise the railways, but I don't think Corbyn is the man to do it. And he should stand down, Andrew.
Do you think he's that bad?
I mean, policy-wise, some of his policies are actually quite good, as I said to you. Although a nuclear disarmament one, I'm a little bit debatable about that. But, you know, really, a lot of his voters were Leavers. Jeremy Corbyn himself even voted against the Maastricht Treaty.
He spent his entire parliamentary career until he became leader campaigning to leave the European Union.
I know, Andrew. If he had stayed true to his word, I would have respected him on that. But, you know, Giza Stewart, she has the courage and the conviction to stand up for what she believes in. She's German and she's Labour, but she still wants us to leave. Now that says it all, Andrew. She's
a very decent, clever woman, actually, and I think you'll find when the team is put in place to lead the renegotiation to get us out of the European Union, I bet you whoever's the Tory leader puts her on the team because she knows her stuff inside out.
Oh, she does, Andrew, absolutely. I mean, for me, like I've said, look, listen, I'm not really a Tory man. I voted Labour under Ed Miliband last general election. You know, and I actually think as well, here's the thing, leaving the EU will actually be the best thing to stop the rise of UKIP. Because now that people feel that they've got this issue out of the way, and we've finally left the EU, we're free of the corrupt, horrible regime that is Brussels, now we can actually start and concentrate on real left-wing policies. We need to, we need to decrease the gap between rich and poor, Andrew.
All right, Chris. All right, Chris, just for pressure time, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We've just got so many people want to get through, and I really want to get through a lot of calls because we've had a lot of guests on LBC today, but I want to hear from the listeners to see what they make of these remarkable events today. I say, in my journalistic career, I have never, ever encountered a day quite on the scale of today. Yvonne's in Enfield. Hello, Yvonne.
Hello, good evening. What I wanted to say, well, just two things, one on Jeremy very quickly and one on Cameron. I've been listening to LBC for nearly 2 years, and I've always said that Cameron was a nincompoop. And the reason why I said that was because he makes up his policies on the hoof, and one day he's going to get caught out. When you make up policies on the hoof, you're not thinking ahead. And this is one of the very, very reasons why he's leaving office, because he never thought it through. And I wouldn't want Theresa May to be the next Prime Minister, because papers have gone missing in the Home Office from the child abuse cases, which no one seems to talk about anymore. You've got Ian Duncan Smith, who was there taking away tax credits, etc. And it was actually someone from the EU that came and fought for the working class to try and reverse the bedroom tax. I'm no fan of the EU because I think they do waste a lot of money, but there are some good things that they did. In regard to Jeremy Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn was in fact more statesmanlike. He did not get involved in the gutter politics, in the racism. He gave us the pros and the cons. He's the only one that I could understand coherently what the pros and the cons were. So at the end of the day, his message was, if we do stay in the EU, we need to reform it, and we need to make it work for everybody across Europe, so wages rise for people across the whole of Europe. Then they wouldn't want to be rushing to come to Britain. So there was a very clear message there, and I can guarantee you this. Even though Nigel Farage has got that vote, he better keep reminding people that they better have a disposable income to pay insurance on the way he wants to run the National Health Service on an insurance basis. Do these people in Sunderland have that disposable income to do that? And they will still be getting the same policies from Ian Duncan Smith, Mr. Grayling, who took away legal aid from people. The solicitors for the first time went on strike. Lawyers went on strike. When you have a problem, can you get legal aid? No. These are the people that presided over all these issues. And believe you me, if you think that it's going to be good, then you need to get good government that's going to spread the wealth. But you will definitely not get it from the people that come after Cameron. Cameron will look like an angel. He will look like an angel compared to what's coming after him.
All right, Yvonne. Thank you for that. That's Yvonne in Empress saying Cameron will look like an angel. What, a hell's angel? A celestial angel? For whatever's coming next, because it could be Boris Johnson. My hunch is Boris Johnson, but don't rule out Theresa May. That would be interesting if the Tories picked another woman, because it would leave the Labour Party looking even sicker, because that would be the Tories having two women leaders, and still the Labour Party are nowhere near having a woman leader. Because if Jeremy Corbyn was chucked over, is there going to be a woman taking over? Can't see it myself. Let's go to Hammersmith. Ella's in Hammersmith. Hi, Ella.
Oh, hello there. First-time caller, so be gentle.
Of course I will. Lovely to have you on, Ella.
Yeah, Yvonne said a whole lot of what I just wanted to say, but I just think you're being very unfair towards Jeremy Corbyn, because YouGov polling showed that 68% of Labour voters voted Remain, whereas only 43% of Tory voters voted Remain. So actually Labour didn't do bad, and Cameron did do pretty bad. So I don't know. I think what's happening is just like the Blairites have been itching to have a go at Corbyn, and here's their chance. And I think it's just very, very biased. And also, like people saying that he didn't have clear policies. Well, I understood his policies. It was to be in the union in order to reform it, and people saying it's not reformable, but there are left-wing parties all across Europe coming up, like Podemos.
Yeah, but I mean, Ellie, I'm glad you say you understood it, what the policy was, but there were reports, and it was coming out in Labour's own focus groups, that Labour voters did not know what the party's position was because they were not making enough noise about it.
But who was writing these focus groups? These there seem to be a lot of people in the party wanting to create problems for Corbyn. You know, so it's just like all I'm hearing is so much negativity towards Corbyn. But when I actually hear him speak, he's very calm and he's very measured, and he doesn't go, like during the EU, he didn't go in for all the hysterical rants and sound bites like Boris and Cameron did. Armageddon's coming and all the scare stuff. He was calm, he was measured, and you could hardly hear him. Plus the media just seemed to focus on what was going on between Cameron and Boris, maybe because it was more exciting, I don't know. Probably that's it. But we don't want a couple of hysterical babies in charge. You know, we need someone calm and, like Yvonne said, statesmanlike. I find him very statesmanlike, and I think the criticism of him is like quite childish, really.
All right, Ella, well, thank you for that call. First-time caller, Ella, to LBC, and a very nice call, too. Very interesting, very thought-provoking. Ella, make sure you call again. This on the same subject. Jeremy Corbyn should stay leader of the Labour Party. I, for one, won't vote for Labour in the next election if he isn't the leader. That's from Shirley. More people who support Jeremy Corbyn, do call 0345 6060 973. I'm Andrew Pearce, it's LBC. The time is now 9:30. Here with your latest headlines, Charles Rowe. So in a remarkable day of twists and turns politically, we leave the European Union, seismic political event. It's caused great upset in Paris and Germany, and of course the French and German leaders have their own elections coming up. They won't welcome the British result, let me tell you, because they'll be worried it will stir Euroscepticism in their own backyards, particularly Mrs Merkel. She's been there far too long. But what of then we get the Prime Minister resigning, and then we discover later this afternoon 2 Labour MPs are tabling a motion of no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn, which could lead to a full-scale vote on whether he should carry on as leader or not. If they decide there should be a confidence debate, he can carry on and he can put his name on the ballot paper and fight again, and in my view, he'll win. So, who should replace Cameron, and should there be a general election straight away, or should he not have stood down? And what about Jeremy Corbyn? Is he useless? Look at the results in the Labour heartlands. Birmingham, Sheffield, Bolton, where else was Sunderland? Amazing results there for Leave. And there were those reports, Tessa Jow was talking about it earlier, the former Labour cabinet minister, saying that a lot of Labour people didn't even know what their party's policy was. Shocking. When the Labour Party was absolutely committed to staying in, only 10 Labour MPs wanted to leave. Half of Tory MPs wanted to leave, and actually the true number was higher than that, really, but as a lot of them were government ministers, they had to toe the payroll line. So, should Corbyn go? Should Cameron have stood down? Who should replace him? And should we have a general election? 0345 6060 973. Chris is in Southend. Hi, Chris.
Good evening, Andrew. Thanks for taking my call.
Pleasure.
Well, what I was going to say, Andrew, is that what this highlights is that the fact that the Labour Party are very out of touch with the majority of their voters. Most of their voters do suffer from uncontrolled mass migration. These are concerns that lots of working class Labour voters have. I do accept that we need stronger trade unions and we need a higher living wage, but you cannot deny the fact that if you have unrestricted numbers from Eastern Europe coming to Britain, it is going to affect wages. And the Labour Party, for me, are out of touch with this. Now, I actually do agree with some of Corbyn's policies. I do think we should renationalise the railways, but I don't think Corbyn is the man to do it, and he should stand down, Andrew.
Do you think he's that bad?
I mean, policy-wise, some of his policies are actually quite good, as I said to you. Although a nuclear disarmament one, I'm a little bit debatable about that. But, you know, really, a lot of his voters were Leavers. Jeremy Corbyn himself even voted against the Maastricht Treaty.
He spent his entire parliamentary career until he became leader campaigning to leave the European Union.
I know, Andrew. If he had stayed true to his word, I would have respected him on that. But, you know, Giza Stewart, she has the courage and the conviction to stand up for what she believes in. She's German and she's Labour, but she still wants us to leave. Now that says it all, Andrew.
She's a very decent, clever woman, actually, and I think you'll find when the team is put in place to lead the renegotiation to get us out of the European Union, I bet you whoever's the Tory leader puts her on the team because she knows her stuff inside out.
Oh, she does, Andrew, absolutely. I mean, for me, like I've said, look, listen, I'm not really a Tory man. I voted Labour under Ed Miliband last general election. You know, and I actually think as well, here's the thing, leaving the EU will actually be the best thing to stop the rise of UKIP. Because now that people feel that they've got this issue out of the way, and we've finally left the EU, we're free of the corrupt, horrible regime that is Brussels, now we can actually start and concentrate on real left-wing policies. We need to, we need to decrease the gap between rich and poor, Andrew.
All right, Chris.
European Union.
All right, Chris. Just for pressure of time, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We've just got so many people want to get through, and I really want to get through a lot of calls because we've had a lot of guests on LBC today. But I want to hear from the listeners to see what they make of these remarkable events today. I say, in my journalistic career, I have never ever encountered a day quite on the scale of today. Yvonne's in Enfield. Hello, Yvonne.
Hello, good evening. What I wanted to say, well, just two things, one on Jeremy very quickly and one on Cameron. I've been listening to LBC for nearly 2 years, and I've always said that Cameron was a nincompoop, and the reason why I said that was because he makes up his policies on the hoof, and one day he's going to get caught out. When you make up policies on the hoof, you're not thinking ahead, and this is one of the very, very reasons why he's leaving office, because he never thought it through. And I wouldn't want Theresa May to be the next Prime Minister, because papers have gone missing in the Home Office from the child abuse cases, which no one seems to talk about anymore. You've got Ian Duncan Smith, who was there taking away tax credits, etc. And it was actually someone from the EU that came and fought for the working class to try and reverse the bedroom tax. I'm no fan of the EU because I think they do waste a lot of money, but there are some good things that they did. In regard to Jeremy Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn was in fact more statesmanlike. He did not get involved in the gutter politics, in the racism. He gave us the pros and the cons. He's the only one that I could understand coherently what the pros and the cons were. So at the end of the day, his message was, if we do stay in the EU, we need to reform it, and we need to make it work for everybody across Europe, so wages rise for people across the whole of Europe. Then they wouldn't want to be rushing to come to Britain. So there was a very clear message there, and I can guarantee you this. Even though Nigel Farage has got that vote, he better keep reminding people that they better have a disposable income to pay insurance on the way he wants to run the National Health Service on an insurance basis. Do these people in Sunderland have that disposable income to do that? And they will still be getting the same policies from Ian Duncan Smith, Mr. Grayling, who took away legal aid from people. The solicitors for the first time went on strike. Lawyers went on strike. When you have a problem, can you get legal aid? No. These are the people that presided over all these issues. And believe you me, if you think that it's going to be good, then you need to get good government that's going to spread the wealth. But you will definitely not get it from the people that come after Cameron. Cameron will look like an angel. He will look like an angel compared to what's coming after him.
All right, Yvonne. Thank you for that. That's Yvonne in Enfield saying Cameron will look like an angel. What, a hell's angel? A celestial angel? For whatever's coming next, because it could be Boris Johnson. My hunch is Boris Johnson, but don't rule out Theresa May. That would be interesting if the Tories picked another woman, because it would leave the Labour Party looking even sicker, because that would be the Tories having 2 women leaders, and still the Labour Party are nowhere near having a woman leader. Because if Jeremy Corbyn was chucked over, is there going to be a woman taking over? Can't see it myself. Let's go to Hammersmith. Ella's in Hammersmith. Hi, Ella.
Oh, hello there. First-time caller, so be gentle.
Of course I will. Lovely to have you on, Ella.
Yeah, Yvonne said a whole lot of what I just wanted to say, but I just think you're being very unfair towards Jeremy Corbyn, because YouGov polling showed that 68% of Labour voters voted Remain, whereas only 43% of Tory voters voted Remain. So actually Labour didn't do bad, and Cameron did do pretty bad. So I don't know. I think what's happening is just like the Blairites have been itching to have a go at Corbyn, and here's their chance. And I think it's just very, very biased. And also, like people saying that he didn't have clear policies. Well, I understood his policies. It was to be in the union in order to reform it, and people saying it's not reformable, but there are left-wing parties all across Europe coming up, like Podemos.
Yeah, but I mean, Ellie, I'm glad you say you understood it, what the policy was, but there were reports, and it was coming out in Labour's own focus groups, that Labour voters did not know what the party's position was because they were not making enough noise about it.
But who was writing these focus groups? There seem to be a lot of people in the party wanting to create problems for Corbyn, so it's just like all I'm hearing is so much negativity towards Corbyn. But when I actually hear him speak, he's very calm and he's very measured, and he doesn't go, like during the EU, he didn't go in for all the hysterical rants and sound bites like Boris and Cameron did. Armageddon's coming and all the scare stuff. He was calm, he was measured, and you could hardly hear him. Plus, the media just seemed to focus on what was going on between Cameron and Boris, maybe because it was more exciting, I don't know. Probably that's it. But we don't want a couple of hysterical babies in charge. We need someone calm and, like Yvonne said, statesmanlike. I find him very statesmanlike, and I think the criticism of him is quite childish, really.
All right, Ella, well, thank you for that call. First-time caller, Ella, to LBC, and a very nice call, too. Very interesting, very thought-provoking. Ella, make sure you call again. This on the same subject. Jeremy Corbyn should stay leader of the Labour Party. I, for one, won't vote for Labour in the next election if he isn't the leader. That's from Shirley. More people who support Jeremy Corbyn, do call 0345 6060 973. I'm Andrew Pearce, it's LBC. The time is now 9:30. Here with your latest headlines, Charles Rowe. Talking to you about Corbyn. More calls coming in about Jeremy Corbyn because he is in trouble. Dame Margaret Hodge, she has tabled a motion of no confidence in him, along with Anne Coffey, another senior Labour MP, and they're saying he's got to go. He's not up to it. They blame him for the fact we're leaving the European Union because in traditional Labour seats, the vote to leave was very high. Are they right to want to get rid of him? There will be a debate at the parliamentary party meeting on Monday, and then there will be decision as to whether it should be put to a vote the next day in a secret ballot. So perhaps we're going to get a new Labour leader as well. Not before time, you might ask? Well, why should you get rid of him? He won with a massive mandate barely a year ago. Huge, the mandate. 250,000 people. No Labour leader has ever had that much support before. Wouldn't that be an outrageous snub to all those people? Wouldn't that be distorting democracy just because they didn't win the referendum? Shouldn't we be giving him a bit more time, or has he had too much time already? 0345 6060 973. Martin's in Gateshead. Hello, Martin.
Hi there.
How you doing?
Hi, Andrew. I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I've got a couple of things to say. You brought up whether there should be a general election.
Yeah.
After there's a change of minister. So I seem to recall, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Blair give way to Brown and there wasn't a ruckus about that? So I think there's precedent for moving seamlessly from Cameron to Boris.
Well, the same thing happened when Mrs Thatcher was toppled. John Major...
Yeah. So there was precedent to say that there doesn't need to be a general election.
Yeah, Jim Callaghan the same when took over from Harold Wilson. Yeah, but is that right, Martin? Particularly...
Stability is best for but we've all been saying how much this EU referendum has destabilised things. The last we need is another general election.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows what's going to be, so we need to batten down the hatches. And also, on the second point of Jeremy Corbyn, I think he's played quite a clever game. It's obvious that from his history, he was for Leave, and he was forced into sort of supporting Remain for the Labour Party. But he can turn around and say, I was for Leave anyway. And he could become some important negotiator so there's got you have Labour and Tory negotiating with the EU. So even if Corbyn gets kicked out, which I don't think he will, because the support for him is, he's a proper left-wing candidate. It's been ages since we've had one. There could be this Brexit government for 3 years, and Corbyn could join that if enough MPs hate him.
Well, that's an interesting take on that, Martin. Thank you for that. That's Martin in Gateshead. Mike's in Newham in East London. What do you think, Mike?
Hiya. Yeah.
It was a big vote for Remain, of course, in Newham, wasn't there?
Yeah. To leave, wasn't it? To leave in Newham.
Was it?
I think it was to leave. I might be wrong, but I thought it was to leave, actually. This is quite strange.
Because most of London was, I just assume, most of London was pretty big for Leave.
Quite a strange one, actually, Newham, was all Labour councillors as well, and I think it's mainly Leave. But, I'd like to say Corbyn, it would be an absolute disaster if the MPs try to get rid of him. I think Corbyn put his case for Europe quite clearly, quite a nuanced position, which I think a lot of people actually swayed me to stay in, because I was sceptical of the whole thing, due to like what they've done to Greece, the democracy side of the EU made me kind of want to leave. But his position, I think people say he went back on his principles. I think he actually made a case that would be better for the most of people. I think a Tory Brexit, people are going to feel the brunt of it, and the workers. But hopefully, the only good thing I think that will come from this is that now it's in Farage's court and Boris's court to provide the goods, that they claim leaving the EU would do. And I don't think they can do that, especially with keeping migration low. So I think what will happen, hopefully people will see that Farage is a fraud, Boris Johnson is a fraud, Michael Gove, and then hopefully they'll see the light and realise, what we need is investment in public services. Immigration is a good thing altogether, and we need to stop the politics of hate and divide and conquer.
All right, Mike, thank you for that. That's Mikey Newham, and just for the record, by the way, we've checked. Newham did vote for Remain, as I thought. I think most London boroughs did, and quite decisively. Tessa Jow was saying in her old constituency it was a 79% vote for Remain. Ron is in Charlton. Hi, Ron, how are you?
Yeah, hi. Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Excellent. Now, listen, this saga with Jeremy Corbyn is kind of concocted, orchestrated, attempts by the embittered Blairite, Thatcherite scourge within the Parliamentary Labour Party, who are not representative of the party at large, to unseat Corbyn. They will fail, and their plans will fall on dead bodies. Basically, we put Jeremy Corbyn there as a proper alternative to the Blairite, Thatcherite narrative that we've been suffering for the past 30 years. And it's clear, Jeremy Corbyn was manoeuvred, he was cajoled, he was cornered into that situation because he's surrounded and outnumbered by, the Blairite remnants within the Parliamentary Labour Party. And, he had to walk a fine line, but it's clear he's an Exeter. He wanted to leave Europe, and I think, obviously he can't say it publicly at the moment, but I think he's pleased at the result, and he should be, because Europe has been the bane of the working people in this country now for 13, 14 years, since the Blairite disaster, let in floods and tsunamis and waves of Eastern and Central Europeans to come here and suppress and to
Ron, Ron, you meant, in fact, you don't. Forgive me for interrupting you. You talk about the tsunami of immigrants coming here, but Jeremy Corbyn. It specifically stopped any mention of levels of immigration being mentioned in any of Labour's referendum literature, to the fury of many Labour MPs. I had Tulip Siddiq on tonight earlier. She's an MP in Hampstead and Kilburn. She put Corbyn's name on the ballot paper. Tessa Jow said the same. We've got to have a discussion about immigration. You're saying it too, but Corbyn censored it.
We don't know that.
We do.
Obvious. No, we
do. Yes, we do.
We don't.
We do.
Well, what you need to provide is the evidence. And
there was no mention of immigration in the Labour leaflets, Ron.
You need to provide the evidence. And
Ron, have a look at the leaflets. There was no mention.
That is by the by.
What do you mean it's by the by? You've just talked about floods and tsunamis of immigrants, big problem, which was caused by Blair and Brown. I'm telling you, Jeremy Corbyn is Labour leader. He has to sign off all the literature. It was blocked from any mention of immigration. And I'd say to you, Ron, hang on. I'd say to you that is a major reason why, in many Labour areas of this country, they voted in large numbers to leave, because Labour were not addressing immigration.
Yeah, this is typical sort of hack rumour mongering. Unless you can provide names.
Ron, provide me the literature which talked about immigration from the Labour Party, sent out by Labour Party HQ. There is none.
That is irrelevant.
What do you mean it's irrelevant? What do you mean it's irrelevant?
It doesn't go to the heart. It doesn't go to the heart of what Jeremy Corbyn...
Ron, you raised immigration. You raised immigration. You said it's a huge problem. It was a huge problem. So why did your leader not address that in your referendum literature?
And I'm coming back to you to prove that he did that and he censored it.
There was nothing in the literature. He signed it off.
Well, listen, it's not a question of, what was in the literature.
Oh, isn't it? Isn't it?
You made a specific...
He said he wants no cap on immigration. I heard him say it himself. I heard him say it on Sky. I heard him say it in many interviews. He does not believe there's any problem with free movement of people. He does not want a cap on immigration. He said the problem is this government is not providing enough resources for school places and NHS places. He is against any caps on immigration.
I spoke to Jeremy last year, at the end of last year, and that was one of his issues. He doesn't articulate it like Nigel Farage, but he was against he was against the importation of cheap labour, right, being sourced from Europe to undercut the working people.
Ron, you've just got to. I'm sorry, because we've had a long conversation. You just got to go back and check the interviews he's done. He is specifically and on the record, not some hack like me, as you call me, twisting his words. He says he does not want a cap on immigration. He wants no change to free movement of labour, which produced a quick response from Tom Watson, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, who said, we need a conversation about free movement of labour. That Labour have got a problem about immigration and they've got to get on and address it. Let's go to Alex in Edgware. Hi, Alex.
Hello, Andrew.
How you doing?
I don't think they've got a problem. I'm good. I don't think they've got a problem about immigration at all, because it was discussed throughout the campaign. That's what Ed Miliband, when he was interviewed on Sky, said he was meeting at the doorstep. The problem with the immigration debate is that it's a false debate. It's made up, and you guys in the media are part of it, because you just agreeing with this guy talking about floods and all the rest of it.
Right, no, that was his words. That was his words, not mine.
You agreed with it, but you agreed with it. And the thing is...
I didn't agree with it, actually, Alex.
Well...
I didn't agree with it, Alex.
You didn't dispute with it.
No, it was his words. It was his words. He raised it, and I said, if it's such an issue, why did your late leader not do anything about it?
It's 9:44. You're going to go to the news. I'm not going to get a chance to make...
Go on, carry on your point. We can always carry on after the news.
Speak to me after the news, yeah. And I'll put my point to you. But my argument is it's false attribution. The whole debate about immigration is about false attribution, and I'll explain what I mean by that.
Go on, carry on.
Yeah. False attribution. People are attributing immigration events in their lives that aren't actually the responsibility of immigration. And if you look at the areas that had the most immigration, parts of London, etc., they were predominantly for Remain. There's that aspect. And there's also, again, something else that's happening in the media at the moment is the media are acting like Labour supporters have to vote to Remain. They don't. They have a choice to vote Remain or exit. And some of them wanted to exit because they're looking at the socio-economic issues relating to how the EU operates. As Corbyn said, it's not perfect. His position on the EU is actually probably the most honest one of many of the politicians, because he stood in front of the public and said, the EU isn't perfect. It's got problems and it needs remedying. It needs to work more for workers. That's what he said. So what we're seeing again is, and this is what's real in our politics, I would say, is the journalist classes, the hacks, there's a whole stream of them. They're responsible for kicking Ken out as mayor.
Oh, come on, hang on, Alex. We've had a good conversation now. Hacks did not kick Ken Livingstone out as mayor. He was suspended by the Labour Party, and the Labour Party is conducting an inquiry into whether he remains in the party. Nothing to do with Hacks. He gave an interview, he made comments, and it was deemed by the Labour Party he had to be suspended. But Alex, thank you for your call. I hope you don't think I censored you at all on immigration, because I didn't. Do keep calling. Jeremy Corbyn is the issue, it seems, to you guys tonight. Men, women, young people, old people. Should he stay? Should he go? Is it, as some people suggest, a Blairite plot to get rid of him? 0345 6060 973. I'm Andrew Pearce. The time is now 9:46.
Andrew Pearce.
And the conversation is about David Cameron too, don't forget, because the reason he's resigned as Prime Minister today, barely a year after his historic victory, the first Tory overall majority since 1992, was because he failed to convince people to back Remain. They rejected his renegotiation, which frankly was pitiful, and he's resigning. And then, when you just thought the day couldn't get any worse or any more complicated or any more dramatic, two Labour MPs put their head above the parapet and say they're tabling a confidence motion in Jeremy Corbyn. So, question I was asking, was Cameron right to go? Who should replace him? And what of Corbyn? Is it time to get rid of him? Is he fit for purpose? Is he up to the job? 0345 6060 973. This says, Keith. Let's go to Keith actually in Rickmansworth.
Hello there, Andrew. I wouldn't vote for Labour at the next election unless they have Jeremy Corbyn in. I think you're suffering under the illusion of thinking that all the Middle and Northern England voted Leave because of immigration. If that was true, they'd have voted UKIP in the general election, which they didn't. The fact of the matter is people have not had a wage increase for 6 or 7 years. They're fed up with corporate power. And this referendum was about pro-nationalist forces versus pro-corporate forces. It wasn't about socialist forces. That's why Jeremy Corbyn and millions of us were disinterested in it. What we're interested in is making sure that this country lends itself to socialist policies that help ordinary people, pensioners, working class people, ordinary people up and down the country, and to help Europe find a new way in Europe to get rid of corporate EU and have a people's elected Europe. That would be much more interesting. But EU, as we presently know it, is finished.
But Corbyn, of course, backed Remain. That was his position. That was the party's position.
He was backed into a corner. And you can't have it both ways. You got some of you people are saying, "Oh, well, he wasn't enthusiastic enough," and others are saying, he doesn't lead.
Yeah, but Keith, if you're the leader of a party which is overwhelmingly committed to being in the European Union, hang on, only
not overwhelmingly committed.
Well, Keith, hang on, Keith, can I finish? The parliamentary party decide the policy, and only 10 Labour MPs were for out. So, did he not have a duty? And actually, no, it was decided at the last Labour Party conference that they would support remaining in the EU. It wasn't just the parliamentary party. The Labour Party conference decided. Therefore, as leader of that party, it's his job to take up the cudgels and represent that cause. Even if he's only half-hearted in his heart, he has to do it for the party that elected him as leader.
The parliamentary party do not make policy. The NEC make policy.
Yes, and the NEC and the party conference. You didn't listen to me, Keith, did you? The NEC and the party conference decided they wanted to remain in the European Union.
How about letting your caller speak?
Will you listen? Well, will you answer what I just said?
Well, what you said is what you've been saying all evening, and all the other people that have been speaking, pro-blowout people have been speaking. It's not his job to support the parliamentary party if the parliamentary party doesn't represent the Labour Party.
OK, Keith, let's try again, and perhaps you'll listen this time. The Labour Party conference voted, that's the party membership, to support Britain staying in the EU, supported by the NEC and supported by the parliamentary party. So which bit of the party are you telling me isn't in favour of being in the European Union?
He supported the parliamentary, the decision of the conference to remain. That's why he supported it.
Yeah, exactly. So why didn't he do the job more enthusiastically then?
Because he's not really interested in the.
So then he's not a very good leader, is he? Because he doesn't represent the party that elected him, the party that voted in favour of the EU.
The people at large support his policy.
Right. Okay, Keith. Okay, Keith. Have your final word. Go on.
That's what sticks in your craw.
No.
The majority of the party support Corbyn.
Right, OK. So just on that, thanks for the call, Keith, but just to remind people, the Labour Party conference, which is made up of members, trade unionists, all supported Labour supporting staying in the European Union. The party's NEC, that's the National Executive Committee, the same. And the parliamentary party, 232 MPs, all but 10 of them supported Labour remaining in the European Union. I'm saying, if that's the case, didn't he have a duty, even if he doesn't really believe it himself, to take that cause and back it more enthusiastically? Perhaps you agree with Keith that he could just do it to be a one-man band. I simply don't agree with that. Dara, what do you think, Dara? Dara's in Harrow. Hi there, Dara.
Hello, how are you, Andrew?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, I'm Labour, and I'm delighted that we voted to leave yesterday, because I just don't believe, looking at the EU, that it's good for our sovereignty, and the fact that 55% of our laws were made by unelected, or definitely proposed by unelected commissioners. I don't think that uncontrolled immigration is good for working people's wages. I don't think it's sustainable to have a TTIP deal which looks to privatise the health service. And I think that Corbyn was so out of touch with a lot of Labour voters' views on immigration to not even discuss the way that uncontrolled immigration has undercut and driven down wages of quite a lot of working class people, including members of my own family, most of whom voted to leave, shows that he isn't fit to lead a party which is meant to represent working class people. And I think he has to go along with the North London middle class elite of Diane Abbott, Emily Thornberry and John McDonnell, because I just don't think that they represent the party.
Very interesting. And if Dara, if they were to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn, I have to say I don't think they will, who would you put in his place?
Well, I myself, I'm not a Blairite, so I definitely wouldn't want a Blairite, but I would want a leader who is left of centre, maybe looking at nationalising rail, but isn't so much of the type of loony left politics which Corbyn seems to be advocating. I don't want someone, for example, who wants to get rid of Trident, who just wants to get out of NATO, who wants to adopt policies which aren't going to be popular with the electorate. I would say someone like Lisa Nandy, who's the MP for Wigan, maybe Anna Turley, who's the MP for Redcar, maybe even Hilary Benn or Andy Burnham would be better people to lead the party.
All right, Dara, thank you for your call. That's Dara in Harrow. And Sarah's in Wandsworth. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm quite upset, to be honest.
Why is that?
Well, I don't really think that Jeremy Corbyn should be removed from his position. I just feel like...
I don't think he will be, Sarah, is my hunch.
Yeah, because I feel like it's not really his fault about the outcome of the EU referendum. I'm very upset that I couldn't vote because I'm 17, and I was quite upset about that, yeah. I'm very passionate about this issue. I feel like even the EU referendum should have been lowered to like age 16.
Do you know you're about the fourth teenager who's rang in the last hour, Sarah, all equally incensed? Well, no, one actually voted to leave, but all would have liked to have had a vote.
Yeah, I would have actually voted to remain.
Yeah.
Because one of the reasons why I would have voted to remain is because I feel like David Cameron, he's already negotiated with the EU. He said what will happen. We were nearly out of the recession if we kept going on with staying in the EU. We were out of recession. Right now, as soon as the vote for the pound was going, the vote for leave increased, the pound was decreasing. And I feel like now that people have now realised the effect of their vote, they now want to take it back, but it's too late. And I just feel so upset, so angry, and I feel like Jeremy Corbyn being removed, I feel like people are being rash about this issue. I feel like they're rushing into it, they're not thinking about it, and they just, I'm just very, very upset.
All right, Sarah, well, thank you very much for your call. Very nice to hear from you. Sarah, who's 17 in Wandsworth, equally passionate about wanting to stay in the European Union, and very cross, too, that she didn't get that vote. There was a debate about whether 16, 17-year-olds should get the vote, and Parliament said no. Very quickly, this is from Khalid, said, I've been an LBC listener for 40 years. I feel sorry for Mr Cameron. He shouldn't have resigned. I know he took a gamble. It didn't pay off, but for God's sake, it's not his fault. He's our Prime Minister. He should stay. Please, Mr Cameron, reconsider your resignation. Khalid and Ealing. Khalid, he won't. He's going. He's gone. At the end of this remarkable day, huge day, historic day, stay tuned to LBC because it's going to be a roller coaster for the next few weeks. But don't forget you can listen to LBC whenever and wherever you like by listening to the LBC app on your tablet and smartphone. There's also, of course, the LBC podcast service to listen back to any LBC show. Leading Britain's conversation at 1, it's Christo, but up next, it's him, Nick Abbott.